people choose the stopping point of history in a very peculiar way, saying that Arab-Palestinian hostility has been fostered by the Israeli state since the ethnic cleansing of 48 ignores what precipitated the ethnic cleansing of 48, which was the Brits leaving and all the Arab countries saying, well, we're going to try to eliminate all the Jewish people here because of this, right?
It's not of great interest to me.
Wait. How is that not a great interest? That's a really important war. That's where Israel expanded their territory in 3 directions. In the 21st...
It doesn't bother you.
If you cut me off like that...
I know I'm right.
No, then let me finish this point without cutting me off immediately.
There have been polls suggesting that Arabs who are anti...
There's been at least 4 Arab-Israeli wars where 10 plus Arab countries have explicitly stated that their goal is to destroy the nation of Israel. That's probably why they're a little bit dicey about Arabs gaining a significant voting hold in their country. That's probably why.
My God, you are really into this Israel narrative. I mean, I'm surprised.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Did I just say something that's factually incorrect?
Yeah, you didn't. But the United States was attacked on 9/11. There wasn't a movement there wasn't big support to take away voting rights.
Because the United States is the strongest country militarily that has ever existed in the history of all of the world, and we're surrounded by the 2 largest oceans on the planet, defending us from all foreign attacks. Do you think that our position is the same as Israel?
I think before 7th October it was fairly comparable, because Israel, if you look at the amount of casualties they had since the Yom Kippur War, you're really emotional about this. I'm a little surprised.
Wait. Here you are. What's up? Do you wanna? What is your? You wanna introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just introduce myself. My name's Matt Cockerell. I'm a PhD student at the London School of Economics in history. I have a modest internet profile called History Speaks, and that's essentially it. I'm very engaged in the crisis right now, and have sympathy for the Palestinian side certainly more than the Israeli side.
Gotcha.
But I'm not pro-Hamas like a lot of people online are for some reason. Yeah.
Okay. Hit me up with because I'm cramming hard because I've got like limited time before a Ben Shapiro debate. That's probably not going to involve this at all. So give me your few minute Steelman.
What are you going to debate with Shapiro about?
Hopefully stuff related to Biden's presidency and what a Trump presidency might look like, basically.
Okay, so you're not going to debate on the Israel, because I had assumed you were on the. So here is the argument I would make. The argument I would make is not that Hamas are good guys or they're not terrorists. They were justified in massacring people. This is a lot of far left argument. The argument I would make is that the hatred that led young men to produce Hamas, to join Hamas, so like the causality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would not have happened but for decades of Israeli policy aimed at ethnic cleansing. That's the one, ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. That's the first point.
Sure.
And the second point, going back to the founding of the country and the founding ideology of the country, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the second point I'd make is that Israel, and I think this is a relevant point for you because you come at this from a liberal perspective, which actually I share. Unlike a lot of people on my side are like base North Korea, base Stalin, but I come from a liberal perspective, and I think a lot of liberals are siding with Israel and don't realize Israel's a deeply illiberal society. And just to make a couple points in this regard, in 2014, 2015, Pew surveyed the Israeli population and found that nearly half of all Israelis support a mass ethnic cleansing of the Arab population. This question was asked in general terms: do you support removal of the Arabs? Nearly half said yes, like 48%. That's one expression of this. Another expression of this is the vast majority, according to the same polls, said that Jews should receive special treatment under the law. Another expression of this is nearly 90% of Israelis, 80-90%, according again to Pew, said they'd never let their child, they'd be deeply uncomfortable with their child marrying a Christian or a Jew. So I think that Israel has promoted a narrative in the West that it is a liberal society, it's in compliance with international Western norms, and this is a fairy tale that has been sold through propaganda. And I think that the hatred that people in Gaza feel is completely comprehensible. What we can't justify is cashing it out in massacring people, right? We have to condemn that, and they did it. Like, it's not the argument that this was all crossfire. They haven't produced evidence, so we have to. If we're being rational, we have to assume they massacred innocent people, right? And we have to condemn that.
Uh-huh.
But what is the hatred? What is the source of the hatred? That's what I'm interested in. And here's another point I'd make. So the common argument given is, these are just savages, they're Muslims. they hate Jews, blah blah blah. That's a very common meme on the pro-Israel side.
Okay.
Well, you have in Jordan a majority population that is Palestinian. The majority of Jordanians are Palestinian.
Mm-hmm.
You have a small Christian minority there. We have like a science experiment. If we're looking at Islam, Jews and Christians have the same standing in Islam. They're Ahad al-Kitab, people of the book, but they're lower than Muslim. Where are the massacres of Christian Jordanians by Palestinians? Zero. Where is even the social discrimination? It's virtually, unless you're talking about people who converted from Islam to Christianity, Christians are treated very well in Jordan. And this isn't me saying that. You can look up their socioeconomic standing. They're not subject to violence. You can look up polls of how Muslims view them. They're treated well by the Palestinians there. So what is the difference between the radical attitudes of Gazans versus the tolerant attitudes of Jordanian Palestinians to their Christian minority? It's clearly this brutal policy of occupation, which and also.
Well, wait, can you? Here, let's go point by point, actually, because obviously I'm going to challenge you on all these points.
Sure.
On that last thing you said, so you're saying Christians are treated well, and we'll say countries like Jordan. Why do you think Jewish people? In Jordan, yeah. Why do you think Jewish people were treated so poorly in every Arab country after 48?
They certainly were treated very poorly. There was ethnic cleansing. Mm-hmm. There was harassment. It's unjustified, and it's to be condemned.
Well, but what was the Arab justification for it?
The reason for it was the conflict.
Yes,
primarily.
But the conflict was
it was a sense of collective guilt.
Yep.
For the conflict.
Exactly.
No, look.
Well, wait. I just want to be really, really, really clear. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because you made the claim that in Islam, Jews and Christians have the same standing, and then in Jordan, you're saying, well, look, Christians and all these people were massacred. Okay. The implication being that Jewish people somehow did something to be massacred in all these Arab countries, but Jewish people didn't. Israelis did in the Middle East, in Israel. So I'm asking you, what is the Arab justification for the pogroms, for the seizure of property, for the expelling of Jewish people in Arab states post 48? Because it wasn't Israelis they were expelling; it was Jewish people, right?
Justification. So I don't. Again, I'm a liberal Western. I do have connection to the Arab world through my maternal side, who's Egyptian, but. So I do have some bias there, but I am a liberal Westerner who doesn't believe in massacre, expropriating property, and so on. If you want me to tell you why these people thought it was justified, it was because, which is not my position, it's because of the 1948 and 1950 ethnic cleansing project by Israel of the majority of the Palestinian population. So in the 1948 war, this is according to Benny Morris, who's a Zionist and very pro-Israel. Although he's a serious historian, I recommend him to you the other day in point of fact.
Sure, Benny Morris, I believe, is part of the four new
right. Papa is a little bit, even for me, who's very pro-Palestinian, Papa's a little bit tendentious, let's say. Sure. Morris is good.
That's fine. But, yeah, we've got a lot of Benny Morris stuff we've read. Yeah, okay,
anyway,
go ahead.
Morris is my top guy here. Morris, his analysis was, there was this national myth, I'm sure you'll hear this on Israel Twitter, that the Arabs just left voluntarily because their armies were about to attack and so on. Benny Morris found that the vast majority of the people who left in 1948 were either war refugees or they were just physically removed, like ethnically cleansed by the Israelis. So the vast majority of these 800,000 or so people were either war refugees or were physically removed, were ethnically cleansed. And then in 1950, Israel passed a law expropriating their property with no compensation. These are war refugees and ethnic cleansing victims. So in my view, they're all ethnic cleansing victims at that point. If Russia were to say we're taking all of the property and you're not allowed to return to Ukrainian war refugees, that's ethnic cleansing.
Sure. What you just described is what most Arab states did in 48 to Jewish people, and they also did it in 56 after the Suez Crisis, and they did it again in 67 after the Six-Day War. Yeah. So every Arab state seems to be doing it.
I agree. We'd have to look at individual cases, but if you want to talk about ethnic cleansing in general terms, I don't think that's an unreasonable characterization of what happened to the Jewish population.
No, I agree. The only reason. Okay, so in all I barely know anything about this conflict so far. I admit, okay, my knowledge is literally
it's good to read.
Yeah, it's 4 or 5 days old. Okay, so I'm very, very okay.
I'm not disputing your premise. You understand? I'm talking about what preceded it.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm talking about too, because I think that it's very easy for this conflict to just say what preceded this particular thing, and then stop there. So, for instance, you keep bringing up the 800,000 Arab Palestinians that were expelled expelled in 48, right? Which I think is closer to 700,000, but regardless, for those people that were for those people that were expelled, why were they expelled in 48?
Why were the Arabs expelled?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so the majority were war refugees. A large minority were physically removed. There was a plan called Plan Dalet.
I'm aware.
Which authorized
But what did Plan Dalet come after? What came before Plan Dalet? What came before?
Plan Dalet was not a response to Arab policy against indigenous Jews. It was a security measure, essentially.
Yeah, but a security measure for what? Why did they need a security measure, though?
Well, because they're at war. They're at war.
Correct. Okay.
And they also had an ideological vision.
Well,
they did.
That's more contentious. That's more contentious. But
no, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so. So, like, now, did they have a vision of actually physically removing them from the beginning? That is contentious. I actually wouldn't even agree with that. Did they have a vision of taking the land by some means? They did. Absolutely. You get this with Theodore Herzl, for example. Theodore Herzl said something to the effect of, we must expropriate the land.
Sure. I don't care about Herzl. I understand.
Let me clarify, because I don't want to, because some Palestinians exaggerate this quote. He said we have to abide by property rights and so on. But they had a vision and practice for decades of buying up land from absentee landowners, often Turks, and then expelling the propertyless peasants from it.
Sure.
So they were, now, that's different than what happened in 1950, which is just theft of land, really.
Sure.
I mean, they just said, you can come back. So it's within the bounds of property rights, but it is bound to antagonize the population. And in fact, in 1939, the British Empire turned against Zionism in the White Paper, in large part because, first of all, there was an Arab revolt. There was an armed revolt.
Yeah, from 36 to 39, yep.
Right. But the British did recognize that, while they fought the revolt and lamented what they regarded as barbarism and so on, they understood that this situation is not sustainable, of allowing all this Jewish migration where they come in, they buy the land, and kick off these unlanded peasants, right? And that's a vision articulated by Herzl. That's essentially what the practice and a vision. So, I mean, I see a continuity between that, even though I wouldn't call that ethnic cleansing. It's in the neighbor, because it's lawful, right? They're not like taking arms or buying it, but I see that as kind of part of a spectrum, and I understand why people who aren't, in many cases, weren't literate back then and are just tied to land, seeing them and labor, seeing themselves get kicked off the land, these Palestinian Arabs, that there was resentment and anger, right? So
I don't disagree, but again, like, what precipitated the 48 expulsions? What precipitated the enaction of Plan Dalet?
They had they had. This was not, look, they wanted, for ideological reasons, as much land as possible with a Jewish majority.
That might be the case, but unfortunately, historically, we don't have that counterfactual, right? We don't know if that's true.
We have statements from them. We have statements from Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion was clearly happy to see the backs of any Arab who left in 48.
Yeah, Ben Gurion also included in a statement of Israeli independence that he would happily live side by side with Arabs. And Ben Gurion and the Yishuv, the pre-Israeli government, also accepted the 47 partition plan that would have had like 55% of the population of Israel being Jewish Arabs and the other 45% being Palestinian Arabs. So we have those things on writing as well, right? It's not I understand that we have that one statement from Ben Gurion, but if we look at the actions that they took prior to the 48 independence, right, there are other statements too, right?
You're talking about the origins of the war, where the Palestinians, where the Arab population does not accept the partition plan. That certainly is true.
Yep.
But I mean, there were two reasons for that. I mean, essentially, the first was that it violated, in their view, the premise of the UN Charter, which accords self-determination to indigenous peoples.
Okay.
And the second of all is that the land given to Israel was wildly out of accord with their percentage in the population. So they got more land despite having, they got the majority of the land despite the Arabs having more than twice the population. So, look. You can say war is unjust. I'm not defending the decision to go to war. Obviously, it was
sure. I'm not trying to defend any decisions.
There were no rational reasons
Hold on.
motivating.
I understand. Hold on. I just want to be super clear, okay? I haven't even taken a hard stance. Obviously, I'm leaning in one direction. I haven't taken a hard stance one way or another yet, okay? I'm just saying that my issue is I notice that when people speak about this conflict, a lot of stuff will be brought up, but people choose the stopping point of history in a very peculiar way. For instance, saying that Arab-Palestinian hostility has been fostered by the Israeli state since the ethnic cleansing of 48 ignores what precipitated the ethnic cleansing of 48, which was the Brits leaving and all the Arab countries saying, well, we're going to try to eliminate all the Jewish people here because this, right? And that precipitates
What's the evidence that they wanted to exterminate the Jews? This sounds like a national myth to me. I mean, this isn't well supported. They wanted war. Yeah, they did not want the partition plan because they viewed it. Look, they viewed this.
Okay. It might not have been the fact that they would have killed all the Jewish people. That could be the case. I don't have a counterfactual. I can't prove that. Okay. But it is strange that when Israel won their war of independence, it was just Jewish people that were punished in every single Arab state, right? It wasn't Israeli supporters or Zionists. It was Jewish people that were punished in every state. It could be the fact that all of these surrounding Arab nations that went to war with the newly declared Israel, maybe they would have just like conquered the territory and like made Jews live as whatever citizens there.
Here's what I understand about this point. So there's two responses I'd make to this. First of all, I agree with you that this is unjustified. Second of all, I don't understand how Palestinians are responsible for what Egyptians did or what Yemenis did and so on in response to the Nakba. And then the third point I'd make is that
wait, give me the points. Wait, no, wait, yeah, give me the
Jews. So you may ask, why would you talk more about the victims of the Nakba versus these Jews who were chased out of Yemen or Egypt? The answer is that the victims of the Nakba and their ancestors are still in Gaza, or they're in Lebanon with no nationality, or they're stateless in Syria in a refugee camp. Whereas the Mizrahim who were kicked out are in a first world country, Israel, and they're happy there. And I'm glad I don't want them to be removed from the land. But do you understand that they don't want to go back to Yemen? And why would they? Right? They don't want to go back to Egypt. They're happy to be in Israel. So it's like their situation, the consequences of their victimization are no longer being felt.
Yeah, because the Jewish people in Israel fought war after war after war to establish their right to exist. That's the only reason why they have a place to live, right?
Okay, but I don't understand why that's... Okay, so we can talk about the origins of the 67 war, the Yom Kippur war, and so on, who's to blame. But let's do it. Let's do it. We can talk about the origins of any of those, because now I know everything about all of these, okay? So the Suez Crisis was Egypt, okay, nationalizing all parts of the Suez Canal and then cutting off shipment to Israel, which was not only a violation of the 1888 international agreements to not control traffic through that, but it was also most likely a declaration of war because it probably violated the previous armistice lines that had been established in the 48 war, right? So that was the beginning of the Suez Crisis. Which part of that was Israel's fault? Okay, in 67, the core fact of the matter is that Israel attacked Egypt, Jordan, and Syria.
Why did Israel? Okay, well so we'll skip. Okay, we'll go to the 6-day war. Why did Israel attack?
Given that Israel attacked, you have to justify to me that they had no alternative moves and that war was imminent.
War was imminent, and that's why they did attack. Let's see. What was the lead up to the 6-day war? The lead up to the 6-day war was, it was Nasser closing the Suez Canal again, which Israel said would be a cause for war if they try to close off those shipment lanes again. This is exactly what we did with the Suez Crisis almost 10 years earlier.
Okay, so that in your view justified, the Suez matter justified war?
Yeah, of course it does. Closing waterways and shipments? Yeah, of course that justifies war. I think that's internationally recognized as a cause for war. Look. And Egypt literally expelled all the UNEF forces there. They got rid of all the UN peacekeepers. They closed the canal, and they started establishing tiered, layered military lines. So of course, what do you think is going to happen, right? They were building up troops. They were getting ready to invade, obviously, because Nasser's not stupid. 10 years earlier, they literally fought a war over exactly this thing, right? So of course he knows by closing it again, there's going to be another conflict. That's why he's preparing for it.
Yeah, I don't regard the disputes over the rights of Israeli shipping to pass through Suez and the Red Sea to justify a preemptive war. And I think you're very naive if you don't look at the ideological interest. So do you accept that Israel had an ideological interest in expansion to the territory they call. No, I want to answer this.
Wait, you made one claim. Just as a real quick thing. If you said that you don't consider the closing of shipping lanes as a cause for war, that's fine. You're alone there. Your answer there is ahistorical, and throughout all of history, the closing and fighting over shipping lanes has been absolutely huge parts about why we go to war with people and why people go to war. So this is a very big deal, is closing free travel to certain countries. So I just want to establish that. Now, if you think it's not a cause for war, that's fine. Even though you said it yourself, you brought up in 56, there was the Suez Crisis. It was literally fought over this, right? But okay, so 10 years later, the same thing happens. Okay, now go ahead to your point. I just want to establish that. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, the moral question of whether the 67 war is justified or not, we disagree on. It's not of great interest to me.
Wait. How is that not a great interest? That's a really important war. That's where Israel expanded their territory in 3 directions, right? That's a really, yeah. So I think the starting of the 67 wars, I think, is pretty important, right?
Well, we have an ethical disagreement on whether this dispute over this blockade over access to international waters justifies starting a war. I do not agree on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't think that Egypt had an interest in going to war again with Israel? You don't think they had it there?
Of course they did. They hated Israel.
Okay, so they blockaded their straits.
There's no evidence. Look, Israel did not. Israel. Here's my position.
Okay.
First of all, we have a normative disagreement. They just talked about. I don't think, since normative disagreements are often insoluble, I don't think it's very interesting to go back and forth on that.
Okay.
Israel. Here's my perception of the 67 war.
Okay.
Israel wanted to expand. They were provoked by the Suez issue. They had a deep ideological commitment to expansion. They think the land is theirs. They think God gave them the land and so on.
No, they think God gave them the Sinai Peninsula?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
No, not the Sinai Peninsula, but like the West Bank and the Golan Heights, for example.
Wait, but the West Bank and the Golan Heights have nothing to do with Egypt.
Yeah, but they
closing...
didn't just attack Egypt. They didn't just attack Egypt. Their preemptive war was in multiple directions.
That was only because those other countries had signed defensive pacts with Egypt. They told Jordan, they literally explicitly told Hussein, they said, please don't attack us in Jerusalem. And Hussein said, I'm going to. And that's why Egypt invaded the West Bank afterwards and took that land. Now, we might say, well, Egypt or Israel would have taken that land anyway. They would have went and invaded anyway. We don't know that, though, because unfortunately, we can never know because Jordan decided to attack with Egypt.
Here's how we know better than the origins of the Six-Day War, whether you think they're morally justified or not, which we disagreed on this.
Sure.
I don't think Israel showed an interest in negotiation. I don't think Israel wanted to involve the international community. I think they rushed to war for expansionist reasons. We have a disagreement on that.
Sure. But to be clear, you have no proof of any of that, and I can show you tons of proof on the other side. Of course I do.
No, I have massive proof of this. That Israel had a vision, that Israeli leaders for decades had a vision of expansion to Judea, what they call Judea and Samaria, and the Golan Heights. Of course I have proof of this.
Okay, well, you know what would have been really good then for Arab strategy?
You did not. Okay.
Wait. Here, this is so easy. This is such an easy thing, okay? This is what the Arabs should have done then, okay, for their geopolitical strategy. And the whole world, including the United States and Britain, by the way, would have been on their side. If they think that Israel has territorial conquest on the mind, they should have waited for them to do territorial conquest.
Do you deny that okay, so even today, what would you make of you've talked about international norms and so on to try to justify the 67 war. Mm-hmm. Surely you'd agree that the fourth, if you've been reading up on this, and this is the United States position for decades before Trump, that Israel's settlement in the occupied territories, in breach of UN 242, which they had agreed to, you would surely agree that this is a war crime under and that's not a moralistic term. That's just a violation of the 14th Geneva Convention. Civilian settlements in occupied territory are a war crime. One and two, this is obviously revanchist and ideological in nature. They call the West Bank Judea and Samaria. That's an evocation of ancient history.
Whether
so that's not Western values.
Wait, am I going to answer this question, or wait, you asked me a question?
No. Okay, I want to make a rhetorical point. Then I'll shut up for a bit.
Okay.
It is not Western values to say we need to commit war crimes and expand to occupied territory, which we agreed to leave because of God or ancient history. But go ahead.
Okay, I don't know when they agreed to leave the occupied territories. Maybe I haven't gotten up to that. I haven't done a thorough reading of the Camp David stuff or the Oslo Accords yet. So maybe they agreed to leave there and they haven't. So I haven't gotten up to that point yet.
They agreed to UN 242.
Okay.
And also in 68,
wait a second. Hold on. Yeah. You said UN Resolution 242. Was that the same UN resolution that also called for every Arab surrounding state to recognize Israel's existence and their borders?
Correct, and Egypt has done so.
Egypt has, and Jordan has, and any other Arab countries? Do you see the problem? Okay, so so I understand. So yes, okay. So now you
asked me. The West Bank was Jordanian. How does the West Bank justify though? The West Bank was Jordanian.
It was Jordanian. Why did they lose it?
Jordan has normalized ties with Israel. They are now obliged to get out of the West Bank.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay. That they have normalized ties. I don't know what the agreement is going to look like on giving that territory back, but historically, during the Six-Day War, the West Bank was used to stage war against Israel, okay? Not just during the Six-Day War, but in the decades prior to that, with Palestinian attacks back and forth coming from that territory. Right? Number one. So that's Israel's justification of the Six-Day War for capturing it for quote unquote security concerns. Okay. Number two, all of this territory from the western part of Jordan has been used to attack Israel, right? That's where the PLO started. The PLO got so big and violent there, led by Arafat, they literally tried to assassinate Hussein twice, and they tried to...
What has the PLO done since 2005 in terms of violence?
I don't know what they've done since 2005, but I'm just telling you that...
So why is it... So settlements for 18 years, the last 18 years are justified because of this history from half a century ago?
Okay, maybe that, I'm being honest, okay? I haven't gotten to the last 20 or 30 years of history yet. Okay, I'm still working my way up there. But I do know that from the Six-Day War before and onward, the West Bank was a very good staging area for lots of attacks into Israel, right? I'm going to guess that if I keep reading, that probably continues to be the case to some extent. Maybe it's not. Okay, maybe it's not. My guess is going to be it's probably going to be...
Do you think civilian? No. But why are this is a big fallacy that you're falling for?
Okay.
Why are civilian? There would be some argument they could have under international law for a military presence if they could articulate that. Why are civilian settlements, which is just like some white girl from Brooklyn coming there and getting a house and kicking the people off by buying it or by some kind of fake government thing saying, oh, the indigenous people have committed some kind of offense. So they're
are you asking me like why
are civilian settlements in the West Bank good for Israel's security? It seems to me obviously about taking the land.
I'm not current on this, but my huge intuition, uneducated or educated guess, I guess, is that my guess that Israel probably wants to annex the West Bank officially. That's my guess. I don't know if that's 100%. That's my guess.
No, but civilian settlements are also a war crime. They're a
That's fine. I don't care. Hold on. I don't care. None of my calculus in this area has to do with what we consider to be like a war crime.
You mentioned closing waterways has been a historical norm for war, and now international law doesn't matter.
It's no. I'm just saying that like when I'm looking at like justifications for either side, what I'm thinking of as like a war crime or not is not like I'm just trying to look at the reality of the situation on the ground. Like for instance, it might be the case that if Israel stops committing everything that you would consider a war crime, that the next day Israel is eliminated from the face of the earth because the entire Arab League decides we're going to come back and destroy them as a country, right? In which case Israel's probably not very motivated to think like, well, what we're doing in this terms of this military occupation of these controlled territories and setting up that's a war crime. They're probably not thinking of it that way.
We're talking about civilians. Military occupation, they'd have an argument to make. What they have done is systematically state-sponsored civilian settlements of occupied territory, which is a war crime and which is what they agreed to do. So they're breaching treaties and committing war crimes.
Okay, sure. But they're doing it on the assumption that all of the surrounding Arabs want to destroy their country, right?
But why would they? Okay, if they want to, if they're all evil, and they want to destroy you. Why would you build civilian settlements there? Maybe you build more bases. Why?
Because building the civilian settlements probably gives you a stronger claim to eventually annex the territory. It's my guess.
Clearly, the people there are going to be in more danger.
Probably, yeah. And I assume settlers know that when they go out there, right? That they are at more risk of attack, and yeah.
So your position is that the civilian settlements in occupied territory are just fine with you. In the West
I never said they were just fine. I think that
that's why I'm asking. I'm trying to clarify this.
Okay. Well, you haven't asked me at all. You're just like making a bunch of statements and then trying to like run around this. I think that the West Bank settlements are probably the worst thing that Israel does in terms of its relations to the rest of the world, right? It loses them more moral credit than probably any other thing. But what Israel probably feels like is because they've been abandoned so much in the past, because they've been essentially on their own fighting against a sea of enemies, most of which to this day don't even recognize that it's a real country, them making territorial concessions to other people isn't going to serve their interests whatsoever, so they might as well just continue to do what they're doing because nobody else is going to actually help them. That's probably like what Israel's thinking thoughts are on this issue. That'd be my guess.
Okay, but is it? I mean, we can talk about the Arabs thinking and why they mistreat the Jews after the Nakba. I don't think it's that. it's deeply relevant when we're thinking about bad, provocative war crimes, systematic. I mean, this is not.
Wait, what do you think is not relevant?
Position.
Wait, what do you think is not relevant?
I want to make one point here. So I want to make one point here.
Okay.
So the idea that these civilian settlements are illegal is not some Palestinian leftist meme. This was a position of every American administration until Trump. So George W. Bush, he wouldn't have said war crime the way I'm saying it, but impliedly he's saying that, right? Because he's saying it violates international humanitarian law of the Geneva Convention. So by implication, he said it's a war crime. The Germans have said this, again, by implication for diplomatic reasons, but
if your whole argument is just going to be saying it's a war crime, I don't care. That argument means nothing to any of the people there. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. It was also a war crime. It was also a war crime when Palestinians were hijacking planes all over the world. It was a war crime when they went to Germany and they killed 11 Israeli athletes. It's war crimes when they cross territory to go into Israeli territory and try to bomb and kill civilians. It's war crimes when they try to coup all of the countries that the Palestinian organizations end up in. It's the Lebanese civil war where war crimes when the PLO went up there. They were war crimes when they were in Jordan trying to do it there. They were war crimes when they were in Egypt trying to kill their king. Like, yeah, I mean, what are you talking about? Yeah, there's war crimes all over this place. I'm not going to be holding Israel to some unique standard in a sea of people who have outwardly pledged. It is a unique standard because
who else? So, okay. People say that there's this Alan Dershowitz meme about Israel's unique. So first of all, a couple of points. First, the founding of Israel was not colonial. It is unprecedented in the history of the world to say we're going to go back because we have ancient ancestry to some place and establish a country. That has never happened in the history of the world. So it's not as if it's a novel. Zionism is a novel project, historically unprecedented. So it's not like double standard to condemn it. We have to engage in independent moral reasoning because it's completely novel.
Yeah, sure, but wait, it's too late. We can't go back 100 years and say that
But I'm just rejecting the Dershowitz meme and then secondly, there are not many countries
rejecting what Dershowitz meme? Wait, what are we talking about?
Systematically attempt to colonize occupied territory because they believe it's theirs, which they clearly do. They call it Judea and Samaria. They don't call it the West Bank.
Hold on. Okay. If you want to make a historical argument, okay, we can make historical and policy and government arguments. I can't debate quotes from people or Israel calls it these things, okay? Now, that might be my lack of education speaking, but I found that when I argue with people, when they tend to throw a quote at me or something, I don't know how to make sense of it. Now,
it's not a quote, it's how the land is referred to in Israel.
That's great, okay? But when I look historically how Israel acquired that land, Israel didn't acquire it through territorial, expansionist, militaristic aims. They did it in defense from 10 plus other countries trying to invade and destroy them. So it hurts your argument to say, well, look, Israel's territorial conquest, aren't they? It's like, well, I don't know. Every bit of territory they seem to gain has happened on the backs of every other Arab country trying to destroy them, right?
We disagree on Israel defending itself in the 67 war. We already discussed that, which is when they got the West Bank. So
you disagree?
I mean, we're not talking about
Hold on, wait. Can I ask a question? Okay. In 56, the Suez Crisis happened. Yes. Okay. And in that crisis, okay, Britain, France, and Israel were going to work to free up the Suez Canal. Yes. There was a war over that. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. After that happened, and the canal was opened up. Okay. Egypt's president Nasser, the same leader, about 10 years later, closes the same strait and starts building military fortifications and mobilizing his entire military back in the Sinai Peninsula. Okay. You don't think that sounds like a preparation for war?
I do not. I think, look, we disagree on this. I disagree that war was inevitable, and I think Israel wanted war for territorial expansion. They viewed themselves as vastly superior to the Arabs militarily. One of these famous Israeli generals, you don't like quotes, but he called Arabs monkeys and so on. They did not think highly of the fighting capacity of the Arabs.
Okay, but hold on. Egypt thought highly of their fighting capacity. Okay, Egypt thought that they could destroy Israel. They saw themselves as militarily superior, right? And then the prior crisis, for the Suez Crisis, that conflict ended in 3 days because of U.S. foreign pressure on Israel, Britain, and France to fuck off, okay? And Britain, France, and Israel, after 3 days, essentially off, Egypt took credit for that militarily victory. They thought they beat all three nations, and they carried themselves forward with that. And that's why they had the gall to close it and start the Six-Day War, essentially, by doing that 10 years later. So Egypt also thought themselves superior to the Israeli military forces. That was the only reason he was so cocky and confident in trying to start conflict later on. So you can't just say it was like Israel thinking they were monkeys and blah, 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 when Nasser is guilty of the exact same complex.
Okay, there were Israeli officials who deny this narrative, by the way.
Wait, deny what narrative?
Mordechai Bentov, that there was some urgent risk of preemptive war and annihilation and so on.
I would be. I don't even know if the. I haven't heard that.
He was in the government at the time, so I just do not agree with this narrative of the war. Look, I think Nasser, Nasser was making assurances he wasn't going to attack Israel. Israel's foreign minister during the war later wrote that Nasser wanted victory without war. I don't agree with you.
Wait, Nasser made assurances at the same time that he was entering defensive pacts with Jordan, at the same time he was mobilizing
obviously, obviously closing the Straits of Tehran was a provocative action, right? It's funny, though, that you're citing customary international law for this, but then it doesn't matter for settlements.
Because I'm not really appealing to quote unquote international law.
You think it's morally justified based on the closing of the straits?
Yes, if people start controlling your ability to
disagree. I think Israel was the aggressor in 67. Now 47, 48, the Arabs were the aggressors based on what they regarded as I think rightly, as an unfair partition agreement. I wouldn't have gone to war over it, but no one's talking about the land Israel acquired in 47.
Why did Egypt... Seriously. Wait, hold on. I can't get over this. Why did Egypt kick out like all the UNEF peacekeepers if they weren't going to war? Why did they kick them all out? Why didn't they just keep them there?
You're drawing an inference from that.
I'm drawing an inference for...
To go to war? Because war was likely. War was likely, obviously. They're not stupid. If you're closing international waterways, that's a provocative action.
Okay, so they were provoking them to war. They kicked out the UNEF forces there because they thought war was likely, and they began mobilizing troops to get ready for war. How is this not a provocation of war?
By the way, the troop movements by an Israeli historian and former diplomat, Michael Oren, the troop movements of the Egyptian military leading up to the so-called preemptive action were defensive in nature. Incidentally, I actually had family in the military at the time, on my mother's side and the Egyptian side. But that's anecdotal. I don't think that's very relevant. But I will say that I don't think that. I think that the case you're making is weak here. I think the better argument you have is the war of independence, so-called.
Sure, that's fine. But I mean, like, the reality is that for the Six-Day War, military fortifications were being built up in Syria, yes, Jordan, and Egypt, and they were getting other assistance from every other Arab country. Iraq, I think, was sending tanks. Pakistan was sending pilots. I think Saudi Arabia, was sending military supplies.
The Saudis, the fact that, look.
Sure, I'm just saying that every other country in the region seemed to think that there was about to be a war, and all of them didn't recognize Israel's right to exist, and there were 3 huge invading forces that Israel fought up. So the idea that no, Israel just did the preemptive war, and somehow everybody else was ready to invade them immediately after, that's pretty wild.
Well, there's no evidence of troop movements and logistics that would make any sense of a plan for invasion, because you have to have logistics and communications and so on and maps. We just haven't found the evidence of this. Again, I quoted for you or referred you to a pro-Israel American-Israeli historian who was actually former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, who rejects this. He's not a shill. He worked for the Israeli government in 2009 under Netanyahu. So
Michael Oren, Six-Day War. You're telling me that this guy thinks that the prior to the Six-Day War that he thinks that the Middle East, that the Arab nations weren't gearing up for war against Israel.
No, sorry, that is not Oren. That is not Oren. Let me get this correct. No, sorry, I'm talking about. I did not mean Oren. I'm talking about Abba Iban, who is also an Israeli diplomat, but he was not. This is not the same individual.
Okay, hold on. Why would I care about what a diplomat is saying about this?
He was the foreign minister during the war.
Yeah, but he's not working in the military intelligence of the prime minister.
No,
why would I care about what
he was the foreign minister. So Abba Iban, I'm sorry, I misstated. I don't know why I got the names confused.
That's fine. Okay.
Abba Iban he was also a diplomat, but he was the Israeli foreign minister during the war, not some guy in 2009 that wouldn't have been relevant. He was the Israeli foreign minister during the war, and he wrote that Nasser did not want war.
Okay, that's interesting because that seems to contradict every single other thing that that I've read.
Oren argues. So sorry, Oren argues. So Oren's relevant too. Oren argues that there was some ideological project. The Arabs wanted to destroy Israel, so Israel had to act. So he argues that, but he's supportive of my point insofar as he concedes, contrary to his thesis, that the deployments and the infrastructure and logistics that Israeli intelligence found regarding Egypt showed that the Egyptian preparations were defensive.
Gotcha. Okay, so if you can, real quick.
So Oren is relevant. His conclusion is agreeing with yours, but he's relevant. The guy who was the foreign minister of Israel during the war, Aban, I can't pronounce these people's names.
That's fine. Aban. Okay, so
those are the two people who are relevant. Oren and Aban. Oren agrees with your thesis,
I understand.
but he I believe the data he finds is supportive of my thesis, and Iban agrees with my thesis that Nasser did not want war.
Iban might. Wait. This is important.
I think they rushed to war.
Sure. Let's just. Maybe they rushed to war. Okay. This was Iban on the third day of the 6-day war, okay? This was an address that he made to the world via the United Nations. I'm just going to read 3 paragraphs of this, okay? I've just come from Jerusalem to tell the Security Council that Israel, by her independent effort and sacrifice, has passed from serious danger to successful resistance. 2 days ago, her condition caused much concern across the humane and friendly world. Israel has reached a somber hour. Let me try to evoke the point at which our fortune stood. An army greater than any force ever assembled in the history in Sinai had massed against Israel's southern frontier. Egypt had dismissed the United Nations forces, which symbolized the international interest in the maintenance of peace in our region. Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser had provocatively brought 5 infantry divisions and 2 armored divisions up to our very gates. 80,000 men and 900 tanks were poised to move. A special striking force comprising an armored division with at least 200 tanks was concentrated against Eilat at the Negev's southern tip. Eilat being the southern port town that goes into that Strait of Tehran eventually, right? Here was a clear design to cut the southern Negev off from the main body of our state. For Egypt had openly proclaimed that Eilat did not form part of Israel and had predicted that Israel itself would soon expire. The proclamation was empty. The prediction now lies in ruins. So this was Iban's statement 3 days in. So I'm curious, did he say afterwards?
Statement. Okay. Let me describe what Oren says about Iban. I'm sorry for getting these two guys' names confused. If I need to clarify again. Okay, this was Iban's reaction to the Israeli policy. Iban was livid, unconvinced that Nasser was either determined or even able to attack. He now saw Israelis inflating the Egyptian threat and flaunting their weakness in order to extract a pledge that the president, Congress bound, could never make. So basically, they're telling the president on 26 May that the Arabs are about to attack us, and Iban is enraged. He says this is an act of momentous irresponsibility, eccentric, telling the president that the Arabs are about to attack us. So he is a patriot. He's not going to say publicly my country's lying, right? But he privately thought they're full of shit. He thought they were lying. That's according to this cable cited by Michael Oren, who disagrees with Iban, but I think the data Oren provides is supportive of Iban's thesis, frankly. So the foreign minister thought this was fake. That the Arabs are not about to attack. Yeah, he may have made this speech publicly because what is he going to do? He's like a patriotic Israeli.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no, look it up. I bet there's some of that online. And the U.S. didn't support Israel in the war, right?
Correct.
The U.S. was neutral. The U.S. didn't. We stand for liberalism and so on. Now, what we're doing in Vietnam at the time is
okay. So hold on, I just want to be clear here. Okay, so just I'm just in this paragraph. So Iban didn't believe when a message was sent to him saying that war was imminent. He thought that wasn't the case. He wasn't convinced that Nasser was determined or even able to attack. That was his position. That was his position as a foreign minister. That's it. But there's nothing here that
he wrote later. No, that's not correct. That's his position as foreign minister. But he also, later wrote in his autobiography that he didn't believe Nasser was about to attack. That's what he says in his autobiography.
Okay, well, that's interesting for him. I'd be curious if somebody that was more
foreign minister of the country. That's a pretty good counterexample.
No, it's not. It's not a good. It's a diplomat. I'm not convinced when I look at the military actions that Egypt was taking preceding the Six-Day War.
So you don't think the Secretary of State is apprised of military intelligence and situation at a high level? Like, of course he is. He knows everything. He knows much more than some general does about the political intentions of the Arabs. Yeah, he knows everything. Like,
okay.
He knows,
well, the historical reality is that Nasser was incredibly aggressive. Nasser was incredibly anti-Zionist. Nasser did see himself as like the potential leader of a new like pan-Arab world, and that Nasser thought that destroying Israel or making military advances into that country would strengthen his position as the head of the new pan-Arab league that he wanted to be a part of. So these are things that I know are all true.
The historic reality is that Israel, and you just have to read more if you don't believe me on this, is that Israel has an expansionist ideology and believes they're entitled to what they regard as the ancient land of Israel.
Then why did they pull back in 56 after the Suez Crisis? Why did they give back the Sinai Peninsula after 67?
Why did Jordan make peace with Israel? People play politics too. You operate in the real world. But they have an ideological vision.
Wait. So on one end, Israel is incredibly territorially expansionist, but then when they're not, we're saying that's just because they're being politically efficacious?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, Jordan would Nasser would have loved to destroy Israel, right? But as the foreign minister of Israel at the time said, wasn't actually going to attack in 67. People can have visions, but they have to operate within the confines of geopolitical reality, right? I mean, we'd love for the regime to be changed, right? Everyone in the U.S. government would like that. Everyone in the Saudi government would like that. It doesn't mean we're going to invade Iran, right? So, yeah, some level of pragmatism and restraint just attests to realpolitik. It doesn't attest to a lack of expansionist aim. I mean, I just find it very hard to believe you don't see Israel as an expansionist state. That's very hard.
Israel might be an expansionist state. I'm agnostic on that. The problem with the claims that here's the issue, okay? This is what it's like saying Israel's an expansionist state, okay? Imagine I've got a friend who's murdered 4 people, all right, or killed 4 people, and everybody claims your friend is a murderer. He's just looking for people to kill, okay? But let's say that when we go and look at his past of killing 4 people, every single time was a person came up to him with a knife and they said, I'm gonna cut your throat. And then they get into a scuffle, and then my friends end up killing all 4 of those people in self-defense, right? That's the issue that you run into right now. So when you're telling me Israel is an expansionist, colonial state, they're trying to take over more territory, what you're saying, that it might be true. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's absolutely not true, but what I'm telling you is that you can't support that with history because every Israeli expansion has come off the back of Arab conflict trying to destroy it as a country. So you can't make the counterfactual to me. It doesn't exist. That's the issue.
Okay. There are 2 points here. So first, we've talked extensively about this. I side with the Israeli foreign minister during the war. You apparently don't.
Well, no, I side with the rest of the world, okay? I don't know why the Israeli foreign minister... What?
What's the rest of the world? The United States did not actively support Israel during the war.
No, it's not about supporting. It's that thought that Egypt would invade. When UN forces are expelled from an area, usually you think some real shit is going to happen. The Soviet Union was literally feeding intelligence to Egypt, saying that Israel was like mobilizing their army, which ended up not being true, which also caused Egypt to take an aggressive stance. And Egypt also had aims and drives and desires to destroy Israel as a country, as did every other surrounding Arab state. All of these things feed into a pretty logical conclusion.
The desire to do something is like an 80th of the story in politics. I mean, Kim Jong-un has many desires to do things, right? ISIS has had desires to do things that they couldn't accomplish. The Hutus have desires in Yemen.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, but just to be clear, then, if you want to side with the foreign, if you want to side with the foreign minister, that's fine. I'm siding with what is the historian consensus. Okay, if you want to side with one foreign minister, that's fine. I'm going to side with the historian.
I'm not siding with one foreign minister. This is a hotly contested issue. This is not a consensus issue.
Okay.
But anyway, and it wasn't at the time either in the world, which is why the United States didn't actively support Israel. But regardless. The issue here is not so let's assume you're right, which I absolutely do not. Let's pretend you're right that Israel was acting defensively in some sense in the preemption of an imminent Arab attack in the Six-Day War. So nevertheless, in order to establish a peace, they consent to UN Resolution 242. And 242 says they have to give up this occupied territory in exchange for the recognition of their right to exist in other states, okay? They do part of that. They give up Sinai to Egypt, right? Egypt recognizes them. That's fulfilled there. Both sides fulfill it. With respect to the West Bank, Jordan controlled the West Bank before the Six-Day War. And Jordan recognized Israel in the 1990s. So why then didn't Israel at least cease? You can make your argument about military installations. At least cease their civilian settlements in the West Bank.
So here's a question. Here's a question. Okay, I'll ask you this. I don't know the answer. Is it possible that Jordan didn't want the West Bank back?
No, it's not a matter of Jordan not wanting the West Bank. It's a matter of this was you made the argument that okay.
Hold on, wait. I thought didn't you? I'm sorry. I thought you just asked why they didn't give the West Bank back to Jordan, or am I?
No, they don't have to give it back to Jordan. They have to they can either give it back to Jordan or they can give it to Palestine. They can't, but they have no right to be there under 242 because the premise was we took land that belonged to Jordan. Jordan has to make peace with us. Jordan
hold on, wait.
With them,
we can't cite 242. I don't think it's relevant here, okay? Because Resolution 242 literally demands the recognition of Israel by all of the other surrounding Arab countries.
Israel. And you know who else recognizes Israel? The PLO in the West Bank. The Fatah recognizes Israel.
That's first of all, I'm not actually even sure if that's true. But
or Jordan.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm just saying that 242 only works with all of the other Arab countries coming on board. It's not a bilateral thing.
That's not how it worked. You could argue that with respect to Golan, but you cannot argue that with respect to the West Bank. Because the West Bank has nothing to do with Syria. So why Syria doesn't have anything to do with that? I mean, even they wouldn't argue that. They would just say the civilian settlements are for security. That's how no one takes it seriously.
No one takes what seriously?
The Israeli argument that they're not committing war crimes in the West Bank, no one takes seriously.
No one is taught, because war crimes are the most boring way to bring up any of this thing, because Israel is the only one we talk about when we talk about war crimes. So war crimes don't matter here, okay? War crimes are... Israel
is not the only one we talk about when we talk about war crimes.
Yeah,
Israel
that's the only one that I ever hear about brought up when we talk about war crimes here.
Well, has any Western nation been accused, as Israel was in the Goldstone report, of literally intent? I'm not talking about indiscriminate or poorly sourced attacks that kill civilians or collateral damage. I'm talking about literally deliberately murdering civilians. Israel was so indiscriminate. Let me describe the history of the Goldstone report, because I'll be called I'm misrepresenting it if I don't give all the history. So in the Operation Cast Lead, in the aftermath of that, the United Nations fact-finding mission found that 90%.
Wait, what year are we talking about? When is this conflict? Can you?
Cast Lead is 2008, 2009, so we're way ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. So the UN found that 90% of cases where civilians were killed, no militarily justifiable objective could be articulated by Israel. And in point of fact, they concluded that Israel was intentionally murdering civilians. That was the first investigation. That was the fact-finding mission released in 2009. Now, after that, there were Israel said this is a blood libel, this is the worst thing ever. There are a bunch of scholars who tried to rebuke this. And 2 years later, the chief author of the report, Goldstone, retracted this charge. He had been harassed and defamed for 2 years. Other jurists complained about it. And his 3 co-authors stood by it. So I don't know whether they deliberately murdered civilians. That's what the UN initially concluded. 3 of the 4 co-authors say that. 1 withdrew it after 2 years of harassment. I don't know. The point is, this inference was supported by the fact that Israel was so radically indiscriminate in its attacks, in its bombings. Look, they're going to kill more people than we killed in the whole Iraq war, like probably in a couple weeks. I mean, yeah, if you look at the total Iraq deaths, they're much higher, but that's mostly they were killed by insurgents, not by us. So this country does not abide by Western norms of waging war. And have you seen like I refer to
none of the other countries around Israel also abide by any of the standards of waging war.
But sure, agreed. Saudi Arabia doesn't. But like,
no. Why do you say Saudi Arabia? No, none of them. None of them in the past did either.
No, I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Okay.
But I'm not disputing that. But what I object to is this characterization that Israel is some kind of Western democracy. When
we're not talking about whether Israel is a Western democracy. I don't think they're.
I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying that is a very common meme, that they share our values.
That's fine. Well, they probably do share our values, but
they don't.
Okay.
Do half of Americans support ethnically cleansing African Americans or whatever?
Careful.
Like, no.
Careful. Hold on. I'm sorry. How was the United States founded?
Nearly half.
Who was here before us? We literally ethnically cleansed from sea. What do you think Manifest Destiny was? It was an explicit statement to
we're
ethnically
talking about
cleanse.
Today. No, we're talking about the 21st century.
That's fine.
Come on, that's
I agree. That's great. And
that's a cheap point.
Hold on.
Come on. I'm not talking about we didn't support that in the 19th century. I'm saying today, in the 21st century.
Okay, in the 21st.
No, okay. It doesn't bother you that nearly half of the people in Israel.
You're not speaking because you know you're wrong. Okay, that's why you.
What?
If you cut me off like that,
I know I'm right.
No, then let me finish this point without cutting me off immediately. Okay. The foundation of the United States was far more genocidal, ethnically cleansing, whatever, than the foundation of Israel, okay? Now, are there different standards hundreds of years later? Sure. Should the standard applied to Israel or the creation of Israel in 1948 be the same standard that was applied in 1776, the foundation of standards? Probably not. But I'm just saying that the question of, would we support that as Americans? I mean, our Constitution declared that we were all like equally created under God and all that bullshit, and women couldn't vote and black people were slaves, okay? So
totally irrelevant, because I agree with everything you're saying, and it's just an irrelevancy. Yeah, of course, Israel. Look, frankly, like Lebanon and Jordan have much more civilized standards than the United States did in the 18th century. Like in the late 18th century, you could like rape a slave and you're going to get a slap on the wrist. Like, of course, Israel is much more civilized by liberal standards of morality, and than the United States was. At the fact, but that's never been my claim. My claim is today, do they share our values, being Matthew and Stephen?
Sure.
No, absolutely not.
Who do you think is
not?
Gotcha. I agree.
No, let me finish this point. You made your whole history thing, which I agree with and is irrelevant. But Americans would not support. 50% of Americans would not support ethnically cleansing. And this was all Arabs. This was also Arab Israelis. So we're talking about people with citizenship, right? There have been polls suggesting that Arabs who are anti.
We got to do this point by point. We got to do this point by point. It can't be like you dish galloping 27 different points. Okay.
This is the second point I want to make, though. At the beginning, I said Israel does not share our values.
Okay.
Right? They are.
The United States. You said Americans will not support ethnically cleansing. I disagree with you. I think Americans would support ethnically cleansing. I think a great example of that is 9/11. That was one terrorist attack whose echoes we still feel. Okay, reverberating through American society today. When Trump was elected, he pledged to ban all Muslim immigration to this country. And after 9/11, we wouldn't let people build mosques in New York City, okay? Because we were so threatened by Arabs. That was after one terrorist attack. If the United States had been terror attacked by Arab citizens for decades, I do think that the US people would support ethnic cleansing. I do believe that. We can disagree there, and I can't give you a counterfactual, but I do think that would happen based on how strong a response we had to 9/11.
Yeah, I don't think you can find analogies after 9/11 to support for physically removing entire populations. And by the way, again, this was for ethnically cleansing all Arabs. That would include Druze and Christians. So the Israelis in this poll, nearly half of them wanted to ethnically cleanse the Arabs. We're talking about ethnically cleansing Druze and Christians as well. So that kind of takes
Hold on, I'm sorry, real quick. You can link me a poll showing that Israelis want to mass expel Christians from the country of Israel?
They said Arabs. It was not qualified. They said Arabs. I'll send you the poll right now.
Sure. Well, no, hold on. Arabs make sense.
Arabs includes Christians, Destiny. Like, I think my interpretation is not tendentious. They didn't say Muslim Arabs. They didn't say terrorist Arabs. They said Arabs. And
yeah, because Israel's problem is with Arabs. Yes.
Okay, but that's my point, that is not a value that we share. Also, like, nearly 80% want special treatment under the law for Jews. Is that a Western value? That sounds like it contradicts notions of individualism, personal rights, and so on.
Are you asking me like today in this country? Because obviously, if we go back historically,
obviously, I'm not talking about
when women couldn't vote, when black people couldn't vote. Like, okay,
that is a silly.
No, the idea that we have different standards, the idea that we have different standards for different types of people in the United States is not a value that we share with Israel.
Right.
But Israel has this because they view it as an existential threat to their country. It's not an existential threat to us.
But again, you have Christians in Israel. Why do Jews get special treatment over Christians?
I don't know. I'm sorry. Do Jews get special treatment over Christians in Israel?
No, they want it. Wait,
what are you talking about? They want it. Wait. So you're telling me that? Hold on. You're telling me that? Okay. What kind of special treatment exactly were you talking about?
This was a general question. Should the law discriminate in favor of Jews relative to other citizens? It wasn't specified. I need to just send you this poll.
Wait. Discriminate against Jews or in favor of Jews against other citizens is different than specifically calling out Christians. Those are two different statements.
No, but because Christians are a significant percentage of the population, by implication, it does that. So if you're saying in the United States, but we're going to discriminate in favor of whites, by implication, you're going to be discriminating against blacks. If you're saying,
I'm just curious. I don't know the answer to this. But if I Google, if I Google the Christian population of Israel, is that higher than like the Arab population of Israel?
most of the Christians in Israel are Arabs. Like there could be somebody who's
okay.
Could be
Then it has probably more to do with them being Arab than them being Christian.
Okay, but why is that okay? Yeah, okay.
Why is it okay? Wait, you asked me a great question. I gotta explain. Don't ask me a rhetorical question if you don't want me to answer it, because that question is a very obvious answer. I think that's why you don't want me to answer that question, okay? So you can keep going. We both understand you don't want me to answer because the answer is incredibly obvious, okay? But go ahead.
Answer it. Go ahead.
The answer is because there's been at least four Arab-Israeli wars where 10 plus Arab countries have explicitly stated that their goal is to destroy the nation of Israel. That's probably why they're a little bit dicey about Arabs gaining a significant voting hold in their country. That's probably why.
My God, you are really into this Israel narrative. I mean, I'm surprised.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Did I just say something that was factually incorrect?
Yeah, you didn't. But the United States was attacked on 9/11. There wasn't a movement there wasn't big support to take away voting rights.
Because the United States is the strongest country militarily that has ever existed in the history of all of the world, and we're surrounded by the two largest oceans on the planet, defending us from all foreign attacks. Do you think that our position is the same as Israel?
Israel, I think before 7th October, it was fairly comparable because Israel, if you look at the amount of casualties they had since the Yom Kippur War, and especially since the Second Intifada, they were quite low. Yeah.
The casualties are quite...
Destiny. You have to let me finish. You're really emotional about this. I'm a little surprised.
Wait. I'm not emotional. The issue that I'm having is that... No. Hold on. Let me just be clear, and I'll say this, and you're going to continue to do this, okay? When people argue against me and they don't fully understand what they're talking about, they do this thing where they lay 4, 5, 6, 7 really shitty points on top of one another instead of just going point by point for a discussion, okay? If you want to have like a back and forth, we can, but you keep laying out 3, 4, 5 really shitty premises that you know that I know are really bad, and then you want to ramble past that point. If you want to go point by point, we can. But for instance, when I said that there have been 4 Arab-Israeli wars, where on the Arab side, I believe that over 5 to 10 Arab countries have been involved in every single one of these conflicts with the explicit goal of destroying Israel. For your response to that to be like, wow, you really buy into the Israeli propaganda, nothing I said there was false. So I don't know how I'm supposed to engage with that statement.
It was false. So you think the Yom Kippur War was about annihilating Israel, for example?
That's the one that I'm halfway through right now, but my guess would be...
You don't know that.
Okay, I haven't finished the Yom Kippur War, but my guess would be...
You don't know the Yom Kippur War. Then 47, 48, sure, that's 80 years ago. We can talk about... That's almost as far away as World War II. We can talk about whether we should be freaked out of Germany because of 80 years ago.
The Six-Day War was in 67. Wait, so you're telling me that as I go through the Yom...
You're telling me the aggressor was. The international community at the time didn't agree. The United States didn't support Israel, so we do not agree.
Hold on, us not supporting Israel wasn't because we didn't agree with them. It's just because we didn't have strong military presence in the Middle East, and we didn't want to fuck up the balance of power.
No, we absolutely were skeptical of the lines they were giving us. We absolutely were.
No, the United States just didn't want to escalate conflict in this region of the world.
No. The United States was deeply skeptical of they were skeptical of the Arab side.
I'm sorry, you're just wrong. The Cuban Missile Crisis was in 62. Tensions were huge. There was literally, I read this stupid French word. What is it called? Like détente? There was literally a period following the Cuban Missile Crisis of the United States explicitly trying to chill relations with the Soviet Union following all of this because the world was on like the brink of nuclear extinction. Okay, so when conflict is starting in the Middle East, the United States is explicitly trying to settle things diplomatically, trying to chill things out. The Soviet Union is still shipping weapons to Egypt. They were still trying to provide intelligence for it. But trying to say that, well, the U.S. didn't involve themselves means that the U.S. knew Israel was wrong. That is an incorrect assumption based on all the facts present, unless you have a point there where you can point to me, some U.S. diplomat, some president, somebody saying like, oh, we didn't actually think they were going to attack.
Johnson was skeptical that Israel was about to be attacked, and Johnson thought that if Israel's attacked, Israel will annihilate the United Arab Republic, namely Egypt and Syria military. So that's what Johnson's opinion was. Like you're with Hasbar on this and against the United States, basically.
Okay, I would be curious to see that quote or that statement or his assessment of that.
Find this.
Okay.
President's conclusions. Okay, here's the first part of this. The intelligence was absolutely flat in the fact that the Israelis could wipe out the Arabs in no time at all. That's the first thing. That's what Nicholas Katzenbach, the Secretary of State, Undersecretary of State at the time, said. Okay, yes. Here we go. So, again, Destiny, I don't know why you were so hardcore on this. The Secretary of State at the time, under Johnson, wrote. So Israel said an Egyptian-Syrian attack is imminent on 26 May, right? That's when Iban wrote with Johnson, the foreign minister of Israel. Rusk's response in a memo to Johnson was that our intelligence does not confirm this Israeli estimate, right? So, and U.S. intelligence, in point of fact, characterized, as the other gentleman I mentioned earlier said, that the Egyptian deployments had been defensive in nature, and that Israel was inflating the estimates. Like, the National Security Advisor, Walt Rostow at the time, called Israeli estimates of 100,000 Egyptian troops.
What was the
political gambit?
What was the year this was published?
This is in 68. Sorry, these are contemporaneous original sources.
Okay,
like
first of all, so
like a memo.
I know, and I'm asking because the timeline on this is very important. You just said it was in 68. That's after the Six Day War is concluded.
No, sorry, I misspoke. It was obviously in 67.
Well, you say obviously. Yeah. I don't know what's obvious because I've never seen this before.
Hey,
so why not show me?
Destiny.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah,
here's like a Salon article that summarizes some of this stuff. I'll just DM it to you. Okay. No, look, Destiny, my two main points here are that I'm not trying, you're just in debate mode. And I wish you wouldn't be, because I don't think you're a stupid person. But, and we can disagree, but my two premises here, which I'm trying to argue for, are that one, Israel's policy is primarily responsible for the hatred against it, although people who commit massacres are responsible for that, because that's completely unacceptable, right? So that's the big qualifier I have that a lot of people don't. But the second part is that Israel doesn't share our values, which I think I've articulated many reasons why that's the case.
Who do you think that if we compare Israel to any of the surrounding countries, which of those countries in that area share our value?
No, they don't.
No, I'm just asking who's the closest?
They do not share our values.
Who's the closest in that region of the world? Between all the Arab... Lebanon. Hold on. Lebanon, the country that's hosting Hezbollah, the terrorist militant group funded by Iran, whose explicit goal is to eradicate all Jewish people. That's the country that shares our values more?
No, look, most Lebanese. Look, I'm talking about the population, not Hezbollah. The situation with Hezbollah is almost like a hostage situation at this point there. They're a very powerful militia. The Christians and the Shia used to support them because Hezbollah fought ISIS. That's why the Christians and the Shia liked them. But now Hezbollah is widely disliked except by the Sunnis in Lebanon. So like 29% of the population supports them, basically. I don't like Hezbollah. I'm not condoning that, obviously. I'm talking about the values of the Lebanese people. So if I
look for, okay, so this is current. So by the way, this is an area that I don't know as much about. Okay, I can only go by what I've read in news articles. I haven't studied this. But if I look up
now, the people don't like Hezbollah.
If I look up Hezbollah support in Lebanon, okay,
among Shia and Christians is going to be
I don't care among Shia and Christians. I'm just looking at overall.
No, the majority of the people. The majority of the people, because most aren't Sunnis. Sorry. I misspoke. Among Sunnis and Christians, Hezbollah is very unpopular. Shia will like them. But again, the vast majority of Lebanese aren't going to like them anymore. If you look up 2006, they'll like them. If you look up during ISIS, they'll like them. But not now, no. I really don't understand this hostility. It's very strange. Like, why?
Because I feel like people are giving very one-sided, like ahistorical takes on all of this.
Let's go point by point. What has been what? We had a disagreement about the Six-Day War, and I provided evidence from.
Well, just the initial stating of like
American officials about that disagrees with your.
Hold on, I haven't even finished reading those things. I don't even know if I agree with that yet. Because the other source, for instance, you provided me of that foreign minister didn't seem to agree at all, based on the statements that I was reading.
The Israeli foreign minister did agree. You're talking about
You're talking about the same day when he got that same day message. He didn't agree, and he might not have at that particular point in time.
Well, in his autobiography, it's what the balance of evidence is. Like it's like
the
Hitler
balance
on
of evidence is all as most historians agree. Then you've got one foreign minister that agrees with you, maybe.
Where do you get the claim that this is a very contested issue among historians? Where do you get the claim that that there's a consensus of historians that agree that the Arabs started the Six-Day War? What does that source do? Because this is a contentious.
The only part that I've seen is contentious is that a preemptive strike is okay.
I'm going to push you on this because I think you might be bullshitting here, to be honest.
I might be bullshitting. These are just the facts that I've read. The collection of facts. I don't see.
Okay, you can have your take, Destiny, but what is one thing you are doing to feed your audience credibility on this narrative is that there is a consensus that in '67, we're not talking about the War of Independence or whatever you want to call it. That in '67 the Arabs were the aggressors. What is your citation for that? Because,
whichever historians end up getting cited, which I think Ben Morris, I think one of the guys you brought up, has cited pretty often in most of the reads I've been doing. That seems to have been just the general consensus of everyone in the area. I can't give you a specific historian. If you want to go through specific, what?
Because that's an empirical claim. That's an empirical claim. Like if I'm talking about Holocaust denial.
Oh, okay. Then go. Okay, then fine. I could be wrong. Give me a historian and give me a passage, and we can read it.
I mean, I already gave you multiple people.
No, you didn't. You gave me one statement by a foreign minister. That's not a historical analysis. It's a singular statement. I want you to give me one statement by a historian that tells you that the Egyptians, Nasser, okay, was not hoping to invade and destroy Israel. That wasn't the plan of the Arab states. So I'll wait for you to give me one historian.
Sure, Tom Segev.
Okay, give me the passage. Give me the passage.
I'm not going to quote you a passage, chapter and verse. I haven't read this book for a while.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Wait, then give me the name and I'll look it up right now.
Israel, the war, and the year that transformed the Middle East.
Okay, so give me the name of the guy again, and I'll Google. And I'll try to find out. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What was the name of the guy? What was the name of the guy again? What was the name of the guy again?
T-O-M-S-E-G-E-V.
T-O-M.
By the way, there are not T-O-M. Tom Segev.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a quotation I found. A quotation from him. There was no justification. There was indeed no justification for the panic that preceded the war, nor for the euphoria that took hold of it. And the other guy I mentioned to you earlier, Michael Oren, critiques Segev and provides, even though he goes through the evidence Segev provides and disagrees with it. And also you have people like Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein. Generally speaking, there are fewer historians that write about Israel just because of not many people speak Hebrew. It's a small country and so on. So like there isn't dozens and dozens you can name like Germany, or the Holocaust or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, like you have like the new historians who are these seminal influences. They're like what, 4 people? I mean. But there is not a consensus among historians that the 6-Day War was started by the Palestinians. By the Arabs. Destiny, are you there?
Yeah, I'm just trying to read. I'm curious what Segev's arguments are. So, because I want to read this. If it's true, I'm just trying to find evidence for what you're saying.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I haven't read about the 6-Day War for to be frank, like for since maybe my master's program. I need to reread it. The stuff I know the most about is the War of Independence, the Nakba, and the aftermath and so on. But I think you're in agreement it was ethnic cleansing, so there's not really much to discuss. I mean, you do agree that the absentee property law, you emphasize the Mizrahim who were ethnically cleansed, and I understand that point, but you do agree that the 1950 absentee property law, where it says war refugees and people who were forcibly removed can't come back and we're taking their property without compensation. You agree that amounts to ethnic cleansing, correct?
Sure, but I'm largely uninterested in those claims.
Well, I mean, that's what the Palestinians are interested in.
You just told me that wars 50 years ago don't matter. Now you're telling me that claims of ethnic cleansing 100 years ago do? Okay.
No, here's why it matters, because they're still stateless. And they're in Gaza and Lebanon and the West Bank and Syria, and in Jordan they got citizenship. The reason it matters is because they're still stateless. They're the largest refugee community in the world. So there's a specific reason why it matters. If there had been a Palestinian state since 2000, if Arafat had accepted the Clinton parameters, then I don't think obsessing over this would be...
Wait, that's fine, but historically, they haven't wanted a state because having a state would mean they'd have to acknowledge the existence of Israel.
But come on. So if Israel hasn't wanted 2 states either for the most part. Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't.
Okay.
The Likud party platform rejects 2 states.
That's fine. You might say that, but historically, you can't support that. Because the Arab country, because if we go all the way back to the beginning,
I cannot support that Israel hasn't wanted 2 states.
The Yishuv accepted the UN partition plan, which would have been 2 states.
That's 47.
Okay,
I'm talking about 2009 to now, for example. Like when Netanyahu has banned the government all but 1 year. The Likud party platform does not favor two states. Okay. Netanyahu has said, he said in his 2014, it was either 14 or 15, I can't remember the exact year, election campaign, that no two states will happen as long as I'm prime minister. So if we're talking about contemporary
when he says,
years,
but when he says two states,
Begin didn't want two states. Yeah, in 47, 48, you're correct. They accepted a partition plan. That is correct. Golda Meir didn't want two states, for God's sake. Menachem Begin, who denied Deir Yassin massacre, didn't want two states. Generally speaking, there have been a couple exceptions. Generally speaking, Israeli leaders have not favored two states.
When they don't favor two states, why are they not favoring two states?
Because read the Likud platform. They believe they have a right to go on to Gaza and to the West Bank, which they call Judea and Samaria, because of the Hebrew Bible and because of like LARPing about ancient genetics. Like there's two sides that are very deranged by revanchist and religious ideology here. I mean, the meme is it's just the Palestinians, but it's just false.
You know what? If that was all true, the Arabs would have such a moral authority to command this region, but unfortunately they forfeited all of it. They forfeit all of it by never giving Israel an ability or the opportunity to showcase their territorially horrible fucking expansionist desires, because they've constantly been aggressing against them for literally since the inception of the country. So it's hard for me to say like, oh yeah, like Israel definitely wants to do this, when it's arguably been defensive actions and some reprisal actions for almost their entire history. It's hard to give much credence to the Arab side of the argument there.
So here's my problem with that. I view the civilian settlements in the West Bank. You don't like the word war crimes because I guess it's too sensitive or something for you.
It just doesn't mean anything. It's worthless here, right?
The Geneva Conventions don't. This is not like some PC.
It is some PC bullshit, yeah. Because do you think
Geneva Conventions, Destiny?
Do you think Iran? Do you think? Yeah. Does Iran care about war crimes?
Again, my argument is not that
you
Iran
can't even answer that question. Does Iran care about war crimes? Okay. Does Hezbollah care about war crimes?
No.
Okay. And historically, Hamas doesn't. Does the PLO? Does the PA?
No, and Israel doesn't either. That's my point.
Okay, and none of the other, so if nobody in this area cares about war crimes, and it's 20 against 1, I'm not going to go to Israel and go like, you guys need to be like super 100% up to date on all of your fucking It's hard for me to levy that charge. Should they act in a more moral way? I mean, I would say probably, but damn, far be it from me to criticize them for not living up to like the Jesus standards, right?
Well, okay, so we're talking about Jesus standards, and I mentioned the Goldstone report earlier, where Israel was found 90% of deadly attacks on Palestinian civilians have had no justifiable military objective, and in fact, in the initial report, which was withdrawn by one of the authors, not 3 of the 4, they said they were actually literally murdering civilians intentionally. Like, Destiny, let's go kill that guy over there.
I haven't read that report, so I don't know.
Yeah,
my understanding
does that disturb you?
Yeah, it's not good. My understanding is there have been times historically where the UN, through third-party verification, has actually declared that the IDF have murdered civilians for no compelling military reason. And even the IDF at the time knew it. That's not good. When they do that, that's bad. Yes.
One premise, so I think maybe we're talking at crossroads, because you seem to think I am arguing that Israel is not living up to the moral standards of Saudi Arabia or Iran, right? I'm not arguing this. Syria has, for example, is a much worse record than Israel with al-Assad. We agree on that. That's easy, right? So that is not the argument. The argument is that Israel has sold us a meme in the West that they act in war, that they have attitudes as a society and values like the West. And that's a big part of why I believe people in America support Israel, and it is a fraud.
But it's not. They do.
It's not that Hamas is better. This is not the argument.
Israel more closely mirrors U.S. liberal principles or U.S. democracy than any other country in that region. Like, it's not even close.
They are such a radical departure from it that it's not even worth talking about who's further away. Okay. It's such a. I mean, that's my view. We disagree on that. And okay. Even if you make that assertion, I understand that's your position, what you just said. I believe you believe that. However, I want to press you on this. Do you think that the extent to which, even if you think they're number one in the Middle East, that the extent to which Israel shares our values is heavily exaggerated by pro-Israel advocates, by the Israel lobby, and by sympathetic media coverage of Israel in the United States?
Heavily exaggerated by like pro-Zionist factions in the United States? Almost certainly, of course. Yeah, these people run around doing an ungodly amount of PR for Israel any way they can. So anybody that's like explicitly like pro-Zionist, these sorts of figures, of course, that's where Israel even came from, with these types of people running around the world, right, and building support. The whole attempting to get Britain to sign off on the Balfour Declaration, all that shit, right? Yeah, of course, I would agree with that. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's actually my second main point. I mean, it isn't. We can debate about whether the
when I say like all of
people,
the media is complicit in that, I don't think so. And I think the reporting on this most recent conflict has shown what. Mm-hmm. Sure, the hospital and everything else that's being talked about, yeah. In terms of these, how many statements of Israel's indiscriminately bombing the Gaza Strip and blah, 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 blah is obviously bullshit.
Look,
but
so the hospital thing, I mean, it's okay if you don't follow me on Twitter, I'm a nobody, but I was one of the few pro-Palestinian accounts that when that happened, I said, we need to wait for more evidence. That's still my position, by the way, although the balance of evidence, I think, has shifted toward the Israel side, right? But I never, if you think I'm so biased, I did not fall for this, right? I said we need to wait and see. So there's some.
I'm just saying that it seems like a lot of mainstream media is jumping on heavily critical anti-Israeli narratives. So it's hard for me to say. So it's hard for me to say, oh yeah, all the media is super pro-Israel. Right now, I don't know if that's true. Yeah.
I disagree with you. Here's how I combat that. I mean, the hospital thing, the mistake people made in that certainly gave them an argument that they didn't have before. But I think it's fallacious because the hospital matter. There are two reasons I think some press very briefly reported this as if it were fact. The first is that they had a mistaken premise that the size of the crater and the damage was such that that if you believed that premise, it was inconceivable that Hamas could have done it, given their armaments. So I think they were simply making an inference from a mistaken premise, and that mistaken premise of fact, if believed, made it look impossible that Israel was telling the truth. So that's the first thing. Now, if you're talking about the casualties, the reason people are trusting the Hamas, the Ministry of Health, which Hamas does have authority over, there's no denying that, is because they provided accurate estimates in the past for the most part. That's the reason. The Washington Post explained this. So they're not pro. Do you really believe that the media like these people who murdered these people at a concert? Come on, they don't.
I think the media. Don't like them. I think a lot of like far left cringe, like oppressor-oppressee dynamic analysis has crept in to a lot of like the left-leaning and to some extent the mainstream media, and that has become the singular point of focus that they analyze this conflict through. That Israel is the big bad bullies.
I have to say, I just see much. I understand people like that exist, and they're silly because, like, you know, they're fair-skinned Palestinians. They're Jews from the Middle East or Yemen. So it isn't like a serious analysis of the situation. But I agree with you that there are people who think like the white people are the Israelis and the Palestinians are the POC, and then we have to support the Palestinians for that reason. I think that if you think that dynamic is where the real power lies, as opposed to like the entire consensus of Congress, other than like the squad or whatever, and the cancel culture, which has been directed at Palestinians, including like just people or pro-Palestinians who've just done cartoons. There was a guy fired from his journal editorship for tweeting an Onion article. There are people, university students, some of whom were pro-Hamas, which is terrible. They shouldn't be. People massacred people. But there are some that weren't, that were just pro-Palestine, that are being smeared by association. And by the way, it is a completely coherent. It isn't just some Western LARPer view. There are lots of Palestinians who don't like Hamas. There are lots of Arabs who don't like Hamas. Just look at the polling. I'm talking about the Arab world, not like some diaspora LARPer. No, this is a completely coherent position to be pro-Palestine and anti-Hamas. Simply, and that's based on the fact that tons of Palestinians are in the region, according to contemporaneous polling. Most Palestinians did not, in Gaza even, where the population is definitely radicalized, and that would never deny that.
And the West Bank as well. I don't know why we only say the Gaza Strip.
No, sure, they are. They are, yeah, I'm sure. They didn't support breaking the ceasefire, according to the polling I saw from I don't remember the organization's name, Washington. They're really good polling, so I don't know why I don't remember their name. Washington Institute or something? Yeah, that must be it for nearest policy. Yeah, so most of them didn't oppose breaking the ceasefire. I can send you this now on Discord, and you can share it with your viewers. And Hamas unpopular with key Arab public. So it isn't. My point is twofold. One, it isn't just a LARP position to say I'm against Hamas and for Palestine. A lot of Arabs agree with that in the Arab world. And two, the people who are pro-Palestine are being just indiscriminately smeared as pro-Hamas. And one, that shows poor ethics on the Israeli side of this, and two, it shows they have the power. The people who are advocating for Israel have the power, not people advocating for Palestinians, and that makes me skeptical of your narrative of like a biased media.
It seems like I've already said a million times that we might get fed different types of stories based on the social media we consume, but it feels like to me around the world right now, the pro-Palestinian supporters and marches seem to carry way more power on social media and the media proper than the pro-Israeli one. Now,
what about the cancel culture, though? I mean,
what about the cancel culture?
There was a labor. You think this is? I'm making this up. People aren't being canceled for being pro-Palestine. I think that there have been some people that have been trying to cancel people for pro-Palestinian. That probably has happened, yes. But I also think that there were multiple student unions that were releasing statements in explicit support of Palestine post the Hamas attacks. That's insane. I have never in my life. Now, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I have not seen any school ever release a support for the IDF massacring a village of civilians. Has that happened in the last 20 years? Okay, you're talking about radicalized students who have a strange ideology that has come out of like Black Lives Matter and weird leftist stuff, which I have no sympathy for at all.
Okay, and that narrative seems to be carrying very far on social media.
Again, I have to, with my shitty little social media platform, on 7 October, I condemned Hamas.
That's great. I'm not asking about your condemnations. I'm saying that there are whole student unions that are releasing these statements I
agree, these people are weird.
Okay, and there are whole it's not, hold on, but it's not just these people. There are marches where it's like from the river to the sea, like all of these people protesting.
That is not an advocacy of genocide. That's silly.
Wait, what do you mean? Hold on. From the river to the sea? What do you think that means?
It's advocacy for a one-state solution.
What does a one-state solution look like for Israel?
A one-state solution would look like, if you look at the people who advocate this on the Palestinian side, I don't think it's viable at this point. It's what I favored.
Wait, what does a one-state solution look like for the Jewish people in Israel? Yes.
I'm telling you what people favor. And you can say, oh, they're lying, but this is what people articulate, like Edward Said and so on. A one-state solution would not be the Jews are removed or killed. A one-state solution would be that the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, the Gazans are let out of their internment camp. They are given passports, Israeli passports. They can vote in elections, and as can the people in the West Bank, under the condition that no Islamic law is imposed on the Israelis. That would be part of the constitution, like Turkey's constitution says secularism, or Lebanon doesn't have Islamic law imposed on Christians. It would be a state where everyone has equal rights and the people are let out of their cages, right? I mean, that's what it would be. It's not going to happen because the Israelis hate them and the Palestinians hate them. So, but the river to the sea is a reference to a one-state solution. It's not genocide. And the fact that you're saying that
I understand that it's a...
No, it is not. It is not. I have a buddy who, he's a master's in history, denying history. You should have on too. He does not support massacring civilians. He condemned Hamas. He uses this.
No one is talking about You're giving the most strawman version of like,
no. You're trying to associate. No, you're trying to associate all the advocacy for Palestine with.
I'm saying that first of all, from the river to the sea is a dual position, because people that advocate for the abolition of Israel will say that as well. Number one, okay. Number two, if you do want to, they
do advocate for the abolition of Israel, because if Israel is a Jewish state, so a one-state solution where everyone has equal rights, where all communities have their law, but none is imposed on the other, would be the end of Israel. But it wouldn't be ethnic cleansing or killing of the people.
But, okay, you can say that, and that's fine. But all of the history of the region doesn't seem to point to that. It seems like the desire for the pan-Arab states, for all of the Arabs, Arab League, everybody to come together, seems like it's always been the expulsion of Jewish people from the Middle East. That seems to be certain. Now, maybe in the last 20 years, maybe that's changed a lot. I haven't read as much about that, and I don't see as much about that. But that has definitely been the goal historically, is the expulsion of all the Israeli people.
The PLO, who is in charge in corrupt group, to be sure, they have a history of violent resistance and terrorism against civilians and so on. First of all, the history is not as brutal as we saw. You have to differentiate. So the IRA has killed civilians, right, in Ireland. They're not as brutal as what we saw from Hamas. They've killed even kids, right? So they've targeted civilians for the Irish national cause. So the PLO was a terrorist group, no question about it. They kill innocent people. They did not have the same level of brutality that we saw in this 7 October. That's one thing. The second thing is...
Wait, what do you mean they don't have the same level of brutality? What do you mean by that?
They didn't massacre a bunch of civilians in a concert.
Hold on. The PLO was literally like hijacking planes all over the fucking world. What do you mean they didn't have the same level? They were blowing up planes in front of...
the IRA. Scale matters. Scale matters.
Oh, so the number of people killed okay, well, the PLO just wasn't as big or it had as much power as Hamas. Probably because they weren't getting as much of the insane funding Hamas got from people like
they're the same. This is a pedantic point. Maybe you're
sorry, my bad. Okay.
You're right on this. The point is, since 2005, surely you'd regard it as relevant that since 2005, they have not. The PLO as an institution has not practiced terrorists. They've collaborated with the Israeli government. They've met with the United States. Like Biden's
they might, but I'm pretty sure they also still have that fund going where they pay money to the families of martyrs that try to kill Israeli citizens.
I mean, you seem very unwilling to draw moral distinctions here.
I'm sorry, what is the moral does the IDF pay?
You don't think there's a moral distinction between the PLO in the West Bank and Hamas? You don't think it would be better if Hamas if
the more that I learn about them, the smaller the sliver of light between the two vanishes. Okay, so initially I thought they were quite different because I've heard this propaganda point a lot. Hamas is so much different. Gaza, those Palestinians are crazy. The ones in the West Bank are super chill and cool. But the more that I learn about all these people in the history, and again, I'm not even current yet, the more that doesn't actually seem to be the case.
Okay, they have not engaged in militant activities since 2005. So I don't understand how there's no difference with that. But
nobody. For instance, why is it that after Hamas was elected, why doesn't the West Bank have elections anymore?
Look, the government is deeply corrupt and unpopular with the public there. I'm not condoning it. I'm saying Fatah is preferable to Hamas. I mean, if we can't agree on that, we're in trouble.
Okay.
Like, it's just also the level of commitment to Islamism. Like the West Bank, for example, there isn't, I'm not saying homosexuality is socially tolerated, but there's no law against it. Is that not preferable to what's going on in Hamas and Gaza?
It might be slightly preferable, but it's like such a non-thing that I don't think I care that much. I don't think it's a meaningful difference right now in terms of if you're an Israeli person worried about your country getting deleted. I don't know if you're like, well, I would definitely way prefer the PLO or the PLO. I would way prefer these people to Hamas. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure.
Do you think slowly pushing out? Do you think that we're talking about the West Bank now? Do you think that the civilian settlements? We're not talking about military basing rights. We're talking about civilian settlements. You don't like it in violation of the Geneva Conventions. You don't think that is are slowly pushing out the Palestinians from their homes and land. Have made a two-state solution almost impossible because just if you look at the composition of communities, you have all
said this again, and I've said it before. Hold on, I've said this before. I'll say it again. Israel expanding settlements to the West Bank is not good. It's hurting their moral authority on any issue. I think it's hurting them. I don't think
really also provokes hatred from West Bank people.
Yeah, that's like a following what I just said. That's one of the reasons why you lose more authority, because you're provoking the Palestinians. Yes.
Nevertheless, they've renounced and do not practice terrorism and other violence against Israel. They don't anymore. They did in the past, no question.
Okay. I don't know how true that is, or what. I haven't gotten that current, but we'll see.
Look it up. Do you really think Biden would meet with Abbas if he hadn't renounced terrorism? Of course he wouldn't. We wouldn't meet with somebody who's endorsed terrorism against Israel.
I mean, weren't we sending Pence and the Secretary of State to go meet with Kim Jong-un? And weren't we, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just not sure. I don't know. I can't speak to this. And after all the history of me so far, I don't really trust, like, you're just, I don't want to read this. I got to read this.
If the PLO had, so let's see, you don't know this, that's fine. If, since the second Intifada ended in 2005.
Oh yeah, Clinton literally met with Arafat. Good point. True. Okay.
Right.
So then your answer when you said, wait, so hold on, wait. You just asked me the question: would a president meet with somebody that endorses terrorism, whatever? So the answer is historically yes. Okay. So go ahead. You can make the next point.
Arafat denounced terrorism in '88, and the second Intifada happened after the breakdown in the talks in 2000. So. At the time Clinton met with Arafat had denounced terrorism.
That's fine that he did, but you asked me, this guy might have been pro-terrorism 10 or 15 years earlier. I don't know. That might be the case. I don't know. I'm just saying I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but the second Intifada came after the breakdown in the Camp David talks. So it wasn't like Clinton was meeting with Arafat during the second Intifada, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So you agree on the settlement. At least I have you on that.
You don't have me on that. That's always been my position on that. Yes, I think the settlements in the West Bank are bad for Israel. I think they're bad for their foreign relations. They're bad for their security. They're
so intense. I didn't say I have you as if I won something. I said I have you. We have an agreement there.
Yes, we agree there. Yes.
Why do you think they do the civilian? Do you believe the line about security, or do you think that it's Have you watched documentaries about like what motivates these settlers? I mean, they believe it's their land. They're not talking about we're protecting the homeland. They're talking about this is our land because of God or whatever.
Well, that's good for them. I'm more interested in like because the issue isn't the settlers or them believing that they have God-given whatever bullshit to the land. The issue is the Israeli government providing support to them. That's the thing that I think is more
important. And the Israeli
important.
government supporting them is a Likud government that has in its longstanding program a rejection of a two-state solution. Netanyahu briefly pretended to be in 4-1. Obama didn't think he was genuine. And in fact, he proved he wasn't genuine because he told the public in 2014 when he was up for election that it'll never happen if I'm leader. But the Likud platform says we're entitled to the land because of we're entitled to this land, the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and we support civilian settlements for this reason. So I think at some point you have to just go with what is like the screamingly obvious conclusion, which is this is like a long-term project of taking the land, or revanchism, or territorial expansion, or ethnic cleansing. I mean, it's just pretty obvious, I think. I mean, the United States until Trump, never accepted this security rationale for the civilian settlements. I mean, I think that's a huge stretch. I mean, just look at public opinion there. They think Judea and Samaria is theirs, right? It's a democracy. Why wouldn't they reflect to some extent, the will of the Likud Knicks? Why wouldn't Netanyahu support the views of the people who brought him to power? Is Biden going to defy the overwhelming position of African Americans? Maybe he will once in a blue moon, but not systematically. So I really think that I understand you would disagree with it, but I think you're understanding the role of this illegal ethnic cleansing project in provoking the public. And part of the reason people talk about 48, there are two reasons. First of all, is, as I say, they're still refugees, the largest refugee community in the world. And second of all, because the ethnic cleansing project continues to this day with the settlements. So,
gotcha.
I don't even think we disagree on that much. We just disagree on political conclusions in '67 war. Like, what do we disagree on? Tell me what you think we disagree on. We don't share their values.
I think Egypt wanted to destroy Israel. I think there's enough statements by Nasser. I think that it's like pretty obvious.
Okay, that's definitely disagreement. I think we agree Israel doesn't share our values. The only disagreement is like some pedantic point about like maybe the Lebanese people do more, which I'm not even really wed to. Maybe they don't. We agree Israel does not share. Your position is Israel is the closest in the region, but they don't share our values. Is that correct?
I think they probably would if they weren't in a sea of enemies. I think that they probably.
But that's like a counterfactual claim. But they don't, as it stands right now, whatever the cause.
Correct. Right now, where every nation around them wants to destroy them, they don't seem to. Correct.
Well, every nation doesn't want to destroy them around them.
Well, like historically they have. Egypt and Jordan today seem to be more chill. Yes.
Egypt and Jordan do not want to destroy Israel.
Correct. That's why I just said today Egypt and Jordan seem to be more chill. Yes.
Yeah.
But aside from those two countries, I think besides from Oman, no other country in the Middle East have even, no other countries even, I think, recognize Israel as an actual state.
UAE recognizes them because of Trump's meme.
Did the UAE do it? I thought it was just Oman that had done it, but the majority of them still don't. Yeah.
UAE does, yeah. Look, and I think you've read enough about the news, just even if you haven't researched this question in detail, to know that the Gulf states the Gulf Arab states take a very different view and a less intense view of this conflict than the Levantine Arab states, right? So, like,
probably.
Look, one point I'll make to you, because it's a fair point, is I will say this is an important point. So, like, and I know this just because of my maternal background. The anti-Semitism in in the Levant region is like extremely widespread. So I can't find a more recent poll than this. This is 2006, which is old, but nevertheless, you can see I just sent this to you. Other than Israeli Arabs, so like Israeli citizens, right? Who basically everybody doesn't like Jews in the Levant and Egypt. Right, this is a problem on the Arab side. I'm not going to whitewash, and this includes Christians too. It's like 3% of Lebanese Christians like Jews, and 97% don't like. It's like you'd never find that kind of affirmative, that kind of negative response rate for anything in a poll, maybe other than like, do you favor or oppose like people who eat babies alive, right? Than this, yeah. So you can check it. So the anti-Semitism in the region, that is a big problem, and it can't be underestimated. Now, I think that the hatred I haven't seen data on this, but like, do you like the Jews or whatever, which is this bizarre question that was asked by Pew in 2006 that I just sent to you in Discord. But if you look at the Khalij, the Gulf, my very strong, and this is supported by news articles and so on. I wish we had polling data, but my very strong impression, anecdotally and also through policy, it being exercised by guys like MBS, is that they do not have this intense emotional involvement or hatred of Israel the way Jordanians do, Syrians do, Lebanese do, Egyptians do in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or. I'm sure they're much more sympathetic to Palestine than Israel, but I think the intensity is much lower. And that's why this policy, which I'm sure you've read about if you follow the news, of normalization with Saudi Arabia was quite plausible. I don't know if it'll happen now, but
Well, I'm pretty sure, isn't there an objection that the Palestinian people don't want Israel to communicate directly with Saudi Arabia before settling relationships with them?
Well, no, of course Palestinians don't want that, but they don't want that. They didn't want that to happen in Jordan either. And yet, the king of Jordan, a dictatorship, Abdullah normalized relations with Israel in the 1990s with Clinton as the chief moderator. But I think like if you're talking about the Gulf states, there's less anti-Semitism. I'm not saying there isn't anti-Semitism. I'm sure it's way worse than in the United States or whatever. But like, I'm talking about like compared to Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, right? Where I think there is a lot of Jew. The data I just sent you, if you had a chance to look at it, is really striking, really. But here is the one point that I find fascinating, and I think and I'm turning this into back to our argument. So Israeli Arabs are the only population. And so this poll, it's just shocking. I'll just read some of it. It's old 2006, but I cannot find for the life of me a newer poll that asks, do you like Jews of Arabs? But in this 2006, so the dating on it may undermine this point a bit, but nevertheless, I'll make it. Egypt, 2% like Jews. Jordan, 3% like Jews. Lebanon, 2%, including 1% of Shia, 1% of Sunni, 3% of Christian like Jews. 97% don't like. So basically everybody in these countries is anti-Semitic, right? They don't like Jews. It's not about don't like Israel, it's don't like Jews. Then you go to Israel, and the vast majority of Arabs have a favorable view of Jews. Now, we're not talking about in Gaza or the West Bank, obviously. They're again all negative. But Israeli Arabs with Israeli passports and rights under the law are much less likely to be anti-Semitic. By far the least anti-Semitic population in the region. So my inference from that is that the brutal mistreatment of the people of Gaza and the West Bank, checkpoints, massive poverty, deprivation, indignity, is the cause of this hatred. And the example is the Arabs in Israel, who are mostly Palestinian, mostly like Jews. They mostly like Jews. That's weird. Why are they mostly like Jews? Because they're not living in these apartheid conditions with no passport, no civil rights, nothing. So that's really a foundation of my argument that the Israeli treatment is what causes the hatred, without justifying the fruits of the hatred, obviously.
Okay.
Isn't that weird to you that like the least anti-Semitic population is the Israeli Arab population? These people still favor the Palestinians politically. It's not like they're like patriotic Israelis. They usually don't serve in the military, but nevertheless, they haven't been mistreated in anything like that way, right? They have rights. No one would care if the situation were just about the Arab Israelis. You'd have human rights groups talking about it, but regular people wouldn't care, right? Because it's obviously not apartheid or anything like that for the Arab Israeli citizens. They don't have nearly as much of an anti-Semitism problem. Most like Jews. So
I don't know what is the I don't know what the point we're trying to make here is.
No, I'm saying that the hatred is caused by the mistreatment because you have the same people.
Okay, can you explain to me why the entire Arab world was trying to kill or pogrom Jews after every single Arab-Israeli war? If the only issue was Arabs being oppressed by Jewish people?
I think that's tribalism and anti-Semitism and so on. And I think you have this problem today.
Okay, so then what you just said about the only people that are anti-Semitic people that are being mistreated by the Jews, or that it's because they're being mistreated, that's clearly not the case then, right?
There can be other causes of it. But the point is that the Arabs who were not ethnically cleansed, so that about the majority were, and then these people were forced into refugee camps, or they're still in Gaza and whatever. The majority were ethnically cleansed. A lot weren't, right? A lot stayed and became citizens of Israel. And Maybe they're discriminated against. Maybe we should talk about it. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe it doesn't matter.
You know that Israel
But
has
they're not-
offered
they're not-
citizenship. When Israel offers citizenship to Arabs in like territories like that they refuse, right? That after the 6-Day War,
did.
no, the vast majority did. That after the 6-Day War, Israel offered citizenship to, I believe, everybody in East Jerusalem.
You're not changing from 48 to 67. It's not very helpful. I mean, they wanted to annex the land, clearly.
Hold on, I'm sorry. It was the exact same in 48 and 67. In 48,
no. They did not offer citizenship to the people they kicked out, which was the majority.
Well,
they took their land and said you can't come back. That's
after all of them, yes.
law.
Well, but initially, Israel did accept a partition plan that would have had.
Yeah, sure, we agree on that.
Okay, so
that's a different issue.
What?
We agree on that. Yeah, that happened.
Okay.
The Arabs.
So we did agree.
Yeah,
So
the
Israel would have lived in a
Arabs
state that would have been
also-
55% Jews and 45% Arab Palestinians. So they did accept that initially until everybody went to war with them.
Because it gave them the majority of the land, despite being
most of the land was the Negev
relatively-
Desert. Most of it was the huge swath of desert to the south.
Whatever. If you think that the Arabs were to blame for 47, that's not an insane view.
I'm not saying that the Arabs weren't to blame. I'm just saying that Jewish people did seem willing to offer Arab Palestinians equal rights, equal citizenship, and over and over and over and over again, Arab Palestinians have rejected it.
If you want to know what I think the vision was, going back to guys like frickin' Herzl, it was to treat people who are Muslim who are living in the area with equal rights under the law. However, to get rid of as many as possible. Initially through legal means.
That's
what
fine.
Herzl says.
Herzl died in 1904. I don't care about Herzl, okay?
He's the founder of Zionism.
That's great.
Okay, you care about Ben Gurion?
I do, yes. Ben Gurion would be somebody I cared about, yes.
During the 48 war, Ben Gurion was clearly happy to see as many go as possible.
You might say that, but when Israel declared
I don't see compulsion.
You don't see what?
Look, they have to play with the West. They're relying on the United Nations. They couldn't just exercise a blatant ethnic cleansing. There's some real politics too.
When Ben Gurion, first of all, there's no real politic of the 40s. Okay, Ben Gurion what?
I mean, we're of Bismarck. Like real politic existed in the 1940s
for the Middle East.
Yes.
From 44 to 48.
Ben Gurion's a European, essentially.
That's fine, but from 44
you don't think Ben Gurion had any political savvy?
They literally, one of the largest fucking terror attacks at the time was blowing up that King David Hotel to cover up crimes so to say that like the Jewish people weren't trying to win the favor of Britain at that point. They fucking hated Britain because Britain was literally limiting Jewish immigration to the area.
Right, with the white paper in 39 you're talking about. Yeah, so they were they committed terrorism against Britain. And they also committed terrorism against like British
so I'm just saying that the idea that like Ben Gurion was trying to like play to the favor of the British, it doesn't really make any sense.
He was a smart political actor. He had these kind of thuggish elements in the Yishuv militias, but he also knew how to play the Western statesman. Right? He was not a fool.
Sure, I'm not saying that he's
just because the militias that came to form the IDF,
bro, the rambling is like
I can't. And Haganah, that they engaged in terrorism doesn't mean that Ben Gurion was an unsophisticated political actor. And by the way, the history of terrorism by these groups, shouldn't that? I mean, you condemned the PLO for their history of terrorism. I mean, the groups that formed the IDF were engaged in terrorism.
I don't know if that's 100% true. What?
No. The Irgun didn't engage in terrorism.
Hold on, they did. That was one of.
Hold on. They were one of the groups.
When you cut me off, it's because you know you're wrong.
You understand that? Just pop out of the
okay, hold
sky.
on. Stop. Hold on. Wait. Stop cutting me off every single time I go to talk because you know you're saying it's correct. Okay, so there were groups that formed the IDF, some of which were incredibly radical. The Irgun was one of them. Yes. Okay. My understanding is the Haganah was not one of them, and I'm pretty sure that was the one that Ben Gurion was part of. I'm pretty sure he was highly critical of the attacks, I believe, in that King David camp, and that there was a lot of disunity among the three initial different forces before the IDF was formed about the use of terrorism or whatever. Yes. So some of it was aspects or elements of terrorism.
Sure.
To say that all of them were terrorists is not necessarily true, and there were huge divides among those three different groups that went on to form the IDF over whether terrorism is acceptable.
As there were in the PLO, of course.
Okay, that's fine.
There were a lot of Christian secular elements in the PLO.
I don't know why we're talking about the PLO right now.
No, I'm just saying that I think there is an analogy to be made between the Yishuv and the IDF, frankly, because these terrorist groups formed the IDF and the PLO. And I wouldn't say today there's no difference between the IDF and like a terrorist group. I wouldn't say that. But
You
I
think
would also
today
say
there's
that
no difference between the IDF and a terrorist group? Is that what you said?
No. I didn't say that.
Oh,
I said
okay. I don't know what we're. Hold on.
The,
I don't even know what we're hopping around between like so many different points in history. I don't know what the point we were trying to make.
Trying to relax. Like you seem very agitated. I'm not.
No, yeah. Wait. I am agitated.
Will you at least accept the possibility that I'm trying? I should let you talk more. I'll agree with that. Will you accept the possibility that I'm trying? That sure, I may have a bias. We all have biases. But
It's
I'm
not about biases. You're hopping around.
Within the scope of my bias, I'm trying to be honest and express my understanding of the history and the moral issues, and you're just saying, "Oh no, you're trying to interrupt to win" or some rubbish.
I don't know what we're talking about when we keep hopping between like all these different periods in history. I don't even know what the point we're trying to make is. I'm not even sure.
Okay, you made a point about Ben Gurion. It doesn't do realpolitik. I tried to mention how he navigated between like military that was comprised of substantially of former terrorist groups.
Yes.
And a Western statesman. Yeah, that's
my point.
realpolitik.
My initial point was that I don't believe the early state of Israel was trying to win favor with Western nations because it seems like they essentially have been abandoned by them. So to say that they were like playing like on realpolitik or whatever, that doesn't make sense to me because it seems like
that's not correct.
What part of that is not correct?
So by the abandonment, are you referring to the 1939 white paper which restricted immigration and ended up being during the Holocaust? Is that what you're referring to?
Part of it, yes.
Okay. That is absolutely true that the British abandoned Zionism in 1939. They imposed these restrictions on immigration. They didn't know that the Nazis were going to exterminate the Jews, of course. It doesn't happen until 41.
I don't have no idea. Hold on, wait. I don't know why you're bringing up the Holocaust or any of that. I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Well, it's relevant to the white paper because, look, from the Jewish perspective, the white paper prevented them from going to Palestine during the Holocaust, right? Because the British said you cannot immigrate to Palestine over, like, I don't know, was it 5,000 a year? Very small figure. And then after 45, the British said there's not going to be any immigration. So obviously that led to Jewish death because if more Jews had gone from Europe to Palestine, they wouldn't have been liquidated in the gas chambers. That's my point. So I thought that was what you were alluding to when you said Europe abandoned the Jews.
Yes. And then when they left after the mandate, they just said whatever. Yes. Okay.
Well, but that's not quite true, though. So first of all, the 1939 break was a change in British policy. But prior to that, starting with the Force of Balfour Declaration, the British had been very supportive of Zionism and an essential patronage of it because they facilitated and allowed the immigration. Moreover, American and Soviet lobbying was key to the acceptance of the partition plan in 1947. So no, they've always been got more. You may have read, and that's correct, that the relationship with the United States became much closer after 1967. That is correct. But nevertheless, Israel always was reliant on Western.
After 1940, what did the British or the West do to help Israel?
Again, in 1947, the United States and the Soviet Union, they're not really the West Soviet Union, but they aggressively lobbied other nations to vote for the partition plan.
And the partition plan was rejected, so nothing came from that.
But it gave their state legal legitimacy.
No, it didn't.
It gave their state legal legitimacy.
No,
yes,
it didn't. It didn't.
How did it not?
Because because the only way they got legitimacy was through war. You think they just declared independence and they magically had a state because of a partition plan that nobody agreed to? That the Arabs there didn't agree to?
Absolutely. You don't think the partition plan triggered the war?
No.
Israel was saying we have a state on the basis of this partition plan.
Okay, I totally disagree, but okay.
That was a core foundation. Now they had ideological.
I'm sure they cited to it, yeah. But are you telling me that if no partition plan was there, you don't think they would have tried to fight for independence in that land?
That seems quite plausible they would have, but I think the partition plan was the proximate cause, and it gave them legitimacy. Yes, I mean they need it. Look, they're a small country; they need international recognition.
But they had no international support. What does the recognition matter without any support?
In the war, they didn't. Well, they didn't have military support, but they had political support.
What does political support matter with no military support if it's a war?
Look, if you want to be a nation, you need to be recognized. You need to have trade. You need to have relations, foreign relations. You can't just be LARPing and say, "Oh, here's our country," and no one recognizes you.
But that was essentially what was happening. Wasn't there literally embargoes on like delivering arms to that area? I'm pretty sure the only way Israel got weapons in that area was like covert flights from Czechoslovakia. They weren't even supposed to have weapons down there.
I really don't think. Look, I really don't think that this is. Is your view really that vote did not confer legitimacy to the state of Israel?
No, I think it was them fighting that conferred legitimacy to them. The recognition doesn't mean anything. Here's the question. Okay, we can solve super easily. Let's say that they would have lost the war in 48. Do you think Britain or the United States would have stepped in to ensure their having territory there?
Look, the United States recognized Israel during the war.
Are you going to answer that question or not at all?
I don't think the United States... Look, I don't believe in this Jewish conspiracy.
I'm asking if you're going to answer. You're going to answer that question, or...
No, I come on. Destiny, you're really in like this mode where I'm an adversary. I don't think we have
because you're not answering, because you're not engaging with anything I'm saying. You're just like rambling on random shit. You're telling me that in 48 the political support for them was incredibly important. I feel like with the embargo,
47,
with the embargo, with the restriction of Jewish immigration, I feel like the political support probably didn't matter that much, because if they would have lost,
restriction of Jewish immigration was abolished.
Sure, eventually, but when they lost the war. I'm sorry. If they lost the war, I'm asking if you think
this is a counterfactual. It seems plausible that had they lost the war, there would be some new partition plan that was more favorable to Arabs in 47, or that Israel wouldn't have been to say, I don't know, it didn't happen. Nevertheless, it seems very unlikely to me that the partition plan didn't benefit Israel. It just seems silly. I mean, like, look.
You keep saying those words. It seems silly, but you're giving me zero evidence to believe.
Why do you think so many countries recognize Israel, like officially recognize the state of Israel shortly after the partition plan, right?
I don't know if they
had nothing to do with it.
Hold on. Okay, because I don't remember.
United States.
I don't remember. Did they recognize Israel?
Israel declared independence.
Can I hold on?
But they declared
you're not letting me finish because you know you're wrong. Mm-hmm. So actually now I'm just going to assume I'm correct. I was going to ask you the question, but now I'm probably right. Did they recognize them after the partition plan, or was it after they declared indendence? Sounds like it was probably...
They declared independence.
There you go.
There you go.
So then it wasn't the partition plan, it was them declaring independence. So you're... Okay.
Bro.
Yeah.
Okay. They declared independence along the lines established by the partition plan. So their declaration of independence was a response to the partition plan.
No, that's not true. Hold on. Why do you think that?
Because they cited the partition plan.
Where do you think the borders for the partition plan came from?
Okay, what are we talking about now?
I'm sorry. I'll tell you.
The partition plan was before the declaration.
The partition plan borders were drawn up around the areas that had all of the Jewish majority people living there. So of course, when they declare independence, these are going to be the borders that they're going to try to defend. It's not because the partition plan said it. The partition plan said it because that's where the Jews were. So of course, when they declare independence, those are the territories they're going to fight for. Obviously.
Yeah. Okay. Here's an example of how the partition plan informed the Declaration of Independence. So they were trying to figure out what are we going to call our new state, right? That was one thing they were trying to figure out, okay? And one of the big candidates was Judea, and another was Zion. And Israel decided not to call themselves Judea or Zion because, according to the partition plan, the territory of Zion, namely Jerusalem, as well as most of the Judean mountains, were outside of what was lauded them by the UN. So they were very scrupulously abiding to the partition plan in their Declaration of Independence because they realized that abiding by the partition plan was important for their legitimacy and for their prospect of being recognized. They definitely wanted to expand further, but they weren't going to do it consummate with the Declaration. I'm getting frustrated here because I don't understand why you think I'm arguing in bad faith when these are totally reasonable arguments. But
I can't present another argument because you tell me we can't even consider a counterfactual. So I think it's really obvious that if
the guy said did the fact that in terms of the literal name of the state, they're like, gosh, we can't use a name that implies we're not going to respect the partition plan. That doesn't show
they're not respecting the partition plan is already gone. The partition plan was not agreed to, so it doesn't matter. The Arab states rejected the partition plan. I don't know what past
their Declaration of Independence is carefully tailored to conform to the borders of the partition plan. The point is not that they want to follow it. The point is that they recognize their legitimacy internationally comes from it.
I don't disagree that the borders were similar, but that's because the borders were drawn where all of the Jewish populations already were. The partition plan was not just randomly drawing lines.
They were going to take I get that. They were going to take more territory. They're going to win the war and take more territory. They knew that. Nevertheless, they didn't want to be explicit about that in their Declaration of Independence because they got their international legitimacy from this partition plan. Recognize too, this was like the heyday of the UN. Nowadays, the UN does a revolution.
Okay, so you're telling
right
so then
World War II.
Sure. So you agree. So then you're saying well, don't jump so far ahead. You're telling me, okay, that if the partition plan didn't exist when Mandate Palestine ended in the British left, that the Jews would have just been like, fuck us, and they would have just like been absorbed into some larger Palestinian nation. You think that would have happened?
That could have happened. That was the plan under the white paper. The white paper 39.
I'm not asking you about. I'm asking you what do you think would have happened? You think that...
It's a counterfactual question, I think.
Okay, so hold on. So Israel, well, not Israel, but the pre-Israel that already had the Yishuv, they already had their government, they already had their 3 fighting forces, okay? And they already had their all of their like encampments and cities.
It's not funny that you call them fighting forces, but the PLO are terrorists, but go ahead.
No, some of them, the pre-this engaged in terrorism. I'm not denying that. You think that these people would have disbanded everything and just been absorbed into some proper, larger Palestinian nation?
I think they definitely wanted a nation of their own. Whether they would have been able to achieve that is a question.
And you think really whether they achieved it or not came down to that 47 partition plan?
They knew they needed international legitimacy. They knew they needed that. I mean, why don't you think they declared... So you don't think the coincidence of... Okay, you're saying it's a product of... Look, my view is that here's my view. The Israel's legitimacy, the notion of Israel being a legitimate state causes the war, and Israel claiming statehood causes the war, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first part of it. The second, but what causes that? That's a 47 partition plan. That's the proximate cause, right?
I disagree on that, but I guess...
we disagree on that, but I don't really understand the intensity because it doesn't... I don't think I'm making like crazier false assertions. I mean, the Declaration of Independence clearly is tailored to conform with the partition plan, and it's not that they're going to follow it, but they want to act like they're following it so they can get recognition. I mean, they're going to win the war and take more territory. That's what nations have done in history, right? It's not saying they're uniquely evil for doing that, but nevertheless, they knew that they needed international legitimacy, and to do that, they were going in line with the UN. Also, the UN, as I was saying before, we kind of see UN resolutions as a joke nowadays, which is kind of sad when you think about it, but that is the situation. Right after World War II, there were much more puffed up ideas about the United Nations, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So I think the partition plan is very important for the Declaration of Independence, and of course for the war, which you don't disagree with. The Arab rejection caused the war, so you know.
Okay. Well, anything else?
No, I think those are the two. Again, the funny thing is, like, you're like, oh, you're bullshitting and all this. I think we actually agree. We disagree with the moral and political implications to draw from this, but I think, with the exception of the 6-Day War, we basically agree with what's going on. Again, my main points have been, one, this history and ongoing practice of ethnic cleansing. I don't think you disagree with it. You emphasize the ethnic cleansing of the Jews, which is totally legitimate on the Mizrahim side. My response to that was that it doesn't matter as much because they have a home. The Palestinians, for the most part, don't. I think you agreed Israel doesn't share our values despite some quibbling on the margins. You agree on the settlements. I don't know actually if you agreed that you agree the settlements are bad, but I don't know if you agreed that they're part of a project to take the land. I think you did, but I'm not sure. Is that what you agreed on or no?
I'm not even sure at this point. What year are we talking about?
Now, like settlements now.
I'm not sure. I don't.
Civilian settlements.
Yeah, probably not good.
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you think? Before we wrap, what do you think we disagree on? What is so awful about me? Because you seem pretty exasperated in this conversation.
I just the inconsistent arguments, the jumping around from year to year, the different like standards of evaluating like what the intentions of people were, what was going on. Like, none of it just makes sense to me, I guess. I'm not sure.
All right. Well, take care.
Do you think? I'm just curious. Like just one question. We don't have to go back for this for a minute. Do you think that initially? Do you think that Israel would have lived in peace with the Arab Palestinians on their land if everybody would have agreed to that territory initially? Do you think they would have, or do you think they would have expelled them anyway?
So one state. So like, if the Yeshuv's position had been, we will accept a one-state solution, provided that don't have like Islamic law imposed on us. If that had been the position, would they have lived in peace?
I didn't talk about. I said that when Israel declared independence, okay, if everybody around the area would have just been like, okay, fine, that's your territory, fuck it, chill, Do you think that they would have been okay with all the Arab Palestinians living on their land, or do you think they would have expelled them anyway?
It's a really difficult question. I don't know, actually. I mean, they wanted them to leave in 48. We know that. I don't agree with
if I say that, like, because you keep saying over and over again that in the Declaration of Independence they call out the that UN partition, right? They also explicitly say in their Declaration of Independence that they want the Arabs to stay and to work and build a country with them. So you believe one thing but not the other. Can you tell me why you believe one and not the other?
Well, this is all counterfactual, so it just as interesting.
It's not counterfactual. Hold on, no. Wait, the counterfactual doesn't mean anything here. Okay, I'm just because you said that because something was said in the Declaration of Independence, it must be true, right? Which is they, at the end of giving their like natural and historic right to the land, they also reference that resolution. They also say explicitly in their Declaration of Independence that they are inviting Palestinians to stay there and build a country with them. So do you believe one and not the other, or?
I don't believe. I think that the idea of conformity. Okay, I understand the question now. No, I don't think they ever intended. When the Declaration of Independence was written, they definitely didn't intend to conform to the 47 partition plan. They were merely invoking it because that was the source of their legitimacy in the United States and so on. Like they needed that legitimacy, so the UN had a lot of legitimacy back then. So they imply that they're going to abide by the partition plan, the UN resolution. When in fact,
I'm asking if you think they would have been okay with all of the Arab Palestinians living in their country.
I think they would have been okay with what happened, which is a minority with a large Jewish majority.
Well, wasn't the majority of the original partition plan like 55% Jews, 45% Arabs?
Yeah.
So that's not a large majority. That's.
Well, I mean, look, sometimes you have to take half a loaf to get if you can't get a full loaf. I think they'd rather have had that than no state, because remember the policy in 39 was no state, right? So they accepted it.
So you think that if everybody would have accepted the territory there, do you think that the Jewish people in their newly formed state of Israel, would they have lived in peace with the Arab Palestinians there, or do you think they would have still tried to expel them?
I think they wouldn't have tried to expel them like the way it happened through like ethnic cleansing. I think they would have continued to do what they had been doing, which is buying within the realm of property rights, buying land and expelling people through that means. And I think they would have tried to give people money or incentives to leave. I don't think they actually would have carried out what we would call ethnic cleansing, which is what happened. But I think they would have. Tried to incentivize Arabs to leave. Definitely. I think that there would have been an Arab minority there that stayed, as we have today. But I think they would have tried to incentivize the Arabs to leave because they wanted a robust Jewish majority in their state. But they were willing to have an Arab minority. So that's what my best guess is.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, anything else, or?
I think I'm good.
All right. Thanks for the
Thank you for having me on.
scraping match. It's fun to argue with people. I do appreciate you coming on. It's been fun. Okay.
Yeah. Hope we can do it again. Bye-bye.
All right. Have fun. Bye. I think when I do, after I finish, I'm running out of days. I don't have the time. I think after I do all of my reading, we're gonna have like strict rules for conversations. The like hopping around to so many different things and not just like settling a single point before moving on drives me fucking. Okay. Jesus. We need more structure, yeah. I'm just trying to find this speech. I would be curious. This speech that Nasser gave before the 6-Day War, I wish I could find this full speech. In a speech to Arab trade unionists on May 26, Nasser announced, if Israel embarks on an aggression against Syria and Egypt, the battle will be a general one and our basic objective will be to destroy Israel. I wish I could find this whole speech. It would be interesting, but... Nasser said, we knew that closing the Gulf of Aqaba meant war. The objective will be Israel's destruction. There's like a ... here though. So like what's being said in between? I wonder if the phrase here is being changed. I wish I had access to that full speech. The 6-Day War thing is interesting. In my independent research, I've stumbled upon the minority opinion with historians that Israel was the instigator. I mean, it depends on whether you consider the closure of that strait to be instigation or not. I feel like most people internationally agree that closing access to waterways is almost like a cause for war. that people will go to war over stuff like that. And it seemed like Israel knew they were going to go to war over it. They had already had one war over it. So, I mean, like, it seems like they knew it was happening, but yeah.